now. Can you mute yourself now, because you're something to do with the loop? Okay, so right, that stopped the loop. Helen, how far did you get?
Okay. Do you want me to start
Continue.
again? Or
No,
continue?
continue.
Okay. So I really want the planning committee councillors to visit the site, because you won't know what we're going to have to put up with unless you see it for yourself. Photos do not illustrate the perspective.
Yourself now, because you're something to do with the loop.
We need an independent daylight study. You've declared a climate emergency, an ecological emergency, and also the need for no more hotel bedrooms until 2030. And you should be sticking to those pledges. We just feel unheard. Our living conditions are going to be just... There's 187 objections to this online, and only about 1 or 2 in support. We're just so angry and upset about it. I can't say how much. You know, there's a visitor to my garden, and that's the tree that's going to be felled behind. That's going to be taken down. That's a sparrowhawk that visits my garden. I have a huge abundance of birds that come from that area. It's got a huge biodiversity. It's good for your health, it's good for the environment, it's a green lung for the city, it's an open space in the city that we don't have very many of. It's all going to be completely cramped. My building doesn't appear on many of the diagrams, because if it did, it would show that how cramped the area would be, because we will be completely enclosed and completely surrounded by having yet another high building next to us, right in our faces. It's really imposing, right over our small patios, are directly facing our windows. And however those louvers work, which I'm not convinced, they will be looking in somebody's direction. It may not be mine, it might be somebody else's. It could be into their garden, it could be into somebody else's window, but it will be looking in somebody's direction. We're concerned about noise coming from hotel guests and coming from just the hotel trade, such as deliveries. We don't know how this daylight study was done, but I sought professional advice, and it doesn't seem to be right. We need, and we've requested, an independent daylight study, and I request it again. I'm speaking on behalf of many, many residents that are all really angry and upset about this. And I'm pleading with you to please defer this decision until planning committee councillors can please come and look at the site for themselves, and you will actually see it. People have come and they've said, we didn't know until we came here. A lot of people don't even know there's dwellings there, that we live there. And it's only when people walk out onto the patio and look from the window that they realise what it's going to do, because you compare it to my neighbour's block next to me, and it's as high as her block and will go straight along, and it completely encloses us. It's just utterly heartbreaking, and we don't want to live with it. Thank you.
Fine. Councillor McCabe, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't hear Councillor McCabe.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. I'm Pedro Roos. I'm a practicing architect and urban designer. There are 3 key issues I would like to cover, and they all relate to the new extension. Firstly, overlooking. As Helen has said, despite the fact that the design has been altered to prevent overlooking onto the immediately adjacent amenity space once the building is complete, it does not address the overlooking and the nuisance factor during the construction period of at least 24 months. The mitigation of this critical issue should be included in a construction management plan to be submitted as an integral part of the planning submission to ensure it can be enforced. Secondly, daylight sunlight. It is appreciated that the massing of the building was slightly reduced by introducing a mansard to reduce the daylight sunlight impact. The reduced massing has, however, not mitigated the increased sense of enclosure given the positioning of the new extension in relation to the neighboring amenity space, despite the reduced shoulder height. Not only will it introduce an unacceptable level of enclosure, It will also have a negative impact on the existing levels of natural light and sunlight in the courtyard. This could result in the non-compliance of BRE standards. A further transgression is the loss of daylight sunlight to the local residential buildings in the immediate context. The loss of vertical sky component to the residents directly to the south of the proposed new wing will be significant and beyond acceptable norms. The supporting daylight sunlight report was vague with selected information, riddled with mistakes and inaccuracies, and therefore unconvincing. As requested, the report was reviewed by a supposedly independent consultant that concluded that there will be no major injury to neighbors. It is, however, a letter on the same letterhead as the incumbent consultant, so it can't be seen as unbiased. An independent audit of the daylight sunlight study is absolutely essential. Thirdly, there's the loss of urban green open space. This is a fundamental issue that has just been completely ignored. The eradication of this inner city haven of biodiversity on a World Heritage site is completely outrageous and unacceptable, as is the permanent change of the setting of a grade 2 star and grade 2 listed building from a heritage point of view. The filling in of the current open space will have a considerable impact on the setting, eliminating the breathing space between these significant buildings. These are hard black and white issues that cannot be argued away subjectively. In conclusion, I agree that the existing buildings need to be regenerated, and it's accepted that a certain amount of keys need to be achieved to make the project viable. But at the expense of losing the listed building setting and this precious green biodiverse haven in the heart of a World Heritage city, that is certainly not a legacy that should be imposed by a driving force of profitability. Thank you for the opportunity.
Matt, we still can't hear you.
Could you hear the full?
Yeah, we can hear you, Pedro. I'm the vice chair, but we can't hear the chairman. Can the rest of the councillors hear? I heard you, and I think the other councillors did, looking at their faces and so on. I think it's Matt we're having a problem with now.
You better carry on as chairman, then, yeah.
So the time was up there, and I don't think the last speaker actually had time to. Yeah, that's what I agree, Eleanor. Everyone can hear the speakers. We just can't hear Matt now. I think there's no time really for the last speaker. Jane, I know you're due to come back, but there's a time limit. And I think, Marie, am I right in thinking you did stop and take account for that?
Yeah, I did take account of the problem. So I did stop the timer at that point, and that was the 10-minute. Yeah. So the 10
if councillors are happy, I would prepare to suggest that Jane takes a minute to sum up, and then we can add that to the other side as they're speaking first. Are other councillors happy that I give Jane a chance, a minute to just sum up? Yeah, it looks like it's got approval. So Jane, if you like to be fairly quickly, if you would please, and sum up, and then the other side, I can assure you I'll add a bit on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Decision makers must act in the wider public interest, and proposals before this committee must be compliant with the law. It is unconscionable that any committee member would wade through a proposal that they had the slightest doubt about regarding its compliance with an Act of Parliament. We ask that the committee delay this decision in order to determine definitively whether it stands firmly in compliance with the law. Accusations of complicity and recklessness would inevitably arise if this decision was later to be determined to be unlawful, and the law courts are expensive, and it would be embarrassing and a waste of the taxpayers' money. This is not a matter for subjective discretion. Please think very carefully and do not be drawn into flouting the law. There are no public benefits to this proposal. Restricted access to the mosaics on 2 days a year is laughable. And you would have to be a patron in order to access the spa facilities, so it's rubbish. The more we build modern blocks in Bath, the more we diminish the essence of Bath and its beauty. You are custodians of this city. Your duty is to pass it on unharmed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then, can you hear? Just want to speak again, Matt?
Can you hear me now?
No. Okay. So we've got two speakers, Sandra Tuck and Joanna Robinson, speaking against. If we give them 11 minutes, to be fair to each side, if that's okay. And so it should be Sandra first, I think, who's the agent. If she's there somewhere.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Don't know whether you're going to be able to see me. Have you got me blocked off? It says the host has stopped my video.
But do you want to start speaking, because we can hear you anyway, and then hopefully Mike will perhaps back on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The proposals before you are the result of almost 2 years of intensive dialogue with council officers, Historic England and other experts. The proposed scheme represents a key opportunity to secure investment in the next phase for this treasured but now vacant Grade 2 star listed building, which is located in the heart of the city. 2 rounds of pre-application advice were undertaken along with a process of public consultation. The applicant has conscientiously responded to the feedback throughout, including those of neighbouring residents. We note an objection that insufficient consideration has been given to the asset's conservation, which one of your previous speakers has been talking about. In fact, the harm to the heritage asset has been very carefully considered throughout the process and reduced to an absolute minimum. Historic England's buildings and archaeology teams, the Bath Preservation Trust and the Council's Conservation Officer all now acknowledge that the level of harm has been minimised as far as possible for a scheme of this nature and are supportive in principle of the proposals. We note that the majority of third-party neighbour objections to the scheme focus on the amenity of residents living close to the site. In this regard, we entirely acknowledge that there will be a change to the outlook for some residents living to the south of the site. I would just like to draw attention to some of the facts of the case and taking each of their concerns in turn. There will be no direct overlooking to residents as outlined by the case officer as a result of the proposals. There are just 6 windows facing south and all are treated with louvers or obscured glass, all of which can be secured by condition. Noise will be minimised as all windows will be sealed shut in order to achieve the necessary airtightness for reduced energy demand. Massing of the top floor was reduced specifically to respond to neighbour concerns and now represents a more traditional mansard style roof. There have been significant objections to the loss of the weeping ash. However, the ash is already in decline and has a shortened life expectancy. We note the tree officer did not object to its removal. We are proposing to remove an outbuilding and replace this with a large specimen tree, which will be closer to the neighbouring boundary and make a positive contribution to the amenity of residents. I'd just like to clarify here as well that the new building will be built on the car park, not the garden, and I'll come on to that in a minute. This takes us to available daylight. Some have criticised, and we've heard today, the daylight and sunlight survey, but the survey methodology, which involves a number of tests, follows good industry, good practice, and the results show a very high level of compliance. For example, if you look at the results in the survey, 114 windows assessed, 113 comfortably met the BRE guidelines. So just as an explanation, for domestic windows, they would see a reduction of less than 10%, which is well below the guidance threshold of 20%. There's been a suggestion that an additional test should have been applied, but this additional daylight distribution test is not required by the guidance where details of room layouts are not known, which they're not in this case. I've talked at length with the engineers about this daylight survey, and they've advised that given the scheme has passed with a good margin, it would be highly unlikely to fail the daylight distribution test in any event. Putting aside these technical arguments, in practical terms, it is plain to see that the results of the survey are consistent with the physical surroundings. For example, the new extension is to the north, and so there are no shading or loss of sunlight to residents. And the majority of the residential occupiers live at least 17 metres from the proposed extension. The neighbouring residents will still enjoy a relatively open outlook for this city centre location. We are confident that there will be no overlooking and no significant loss of light. and coupled with the high quality design, the proposed extension will allow for appropriate levels of amenity for nearby residents. In weighing up the planning balance, members are asked to consider the following significant social, economic and environmental benefits of the scheme. The proposals require an investment of around £35 million needed to secure the restoration, repair and conversion of the buildings going forward. The hotel use and associated future management regime will fund the considerable ongoing maintenance costs in perpetuity for these 200 to 300-year-old buildings. It will also facilitate continued public access to the building, allowing hotel guests, visitors and Bath residents to access the new health spa, chapel restaurant cafe and garden, and also on several open days a year. Private residential use would not facilitate any such public access. A historic interpretation strategy is being developed, which will showcase Roman mosaics on the site and use state-of-the-art digital technology to celebrate the building's rich history. The car park, substation and poor environment to the rear of the West Wing will be transformed with a new public entrance and grand conservatory space, as well as public improvements to Parsonage Lane. The scheme will achieve a nearly 40% reduction in CO2 emissions. And finally, the trees visible from Bridewell Lane will be retained. The garden area will be extended by a third and include 6 new trees, water planting and a water feature, soft planting and a water feature. In conclusion, the proposed conversion of the Mineral Hospital will enable Bath to offer a unique visitor experience, safeguard and celebrate this important heritage asset, bring significant investment and new jobs into the area, whilst also preserving an appropriate level of amenity for residents. Approval of the scheme will be a vote of confidence in Bath as
I think Sandra is frozen there, but I think we've probably got Sandra's message there, and time must be getting short. So if we go on to you, Joanna, and if Sandra comes back, but I think it was quite clear what she was saying. So Joanna.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah. Bath Preservation Trust supports these applications and the scope of work proposed. The argument about whether this building should be in healthcare, residential or community use is now behind us. This committee must now consider the merits of the application before them. Substantial changes have been made to improve the design. These changes have responded to our concerns, and we commend the development team for their efforts to design more contextually appropriate interventions. While we have concerns about the height of the extension, we agree with your officer's recommendation that this has limited impact on wider townscape views. And on balance, we feel that the public benefits, specifically the long-term conservation, occupation, public access, use and maintenance of this important heritage building outweighs concerns about less than substantial harm. Therefore, we encourage this committee to support your officer's recommendation to permit this application in the interest of sustaining the heritage value of one of Bath's most significant city centre buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before we go to Sue Craig, who's a local ward councillor, first, I don't know if we can hear you yet, Matt, and B, there's a question legal, so.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can. So you take over, Matt, and you can see Amanda asked a question legal, so. But
thank you very much, Sally. Yes, Amanda, did you wanted a legal question?
Yes, please. Can I ask Simon Elias what we're meant to do? I don't know if you know, but the YouTube video went off for about 4 minutes, so we weren't being broadcast and none of the public could see us. It was quite a confusing 4 minutes because people would have lost us at one stage, and by the time they came back, Councillor McCabe had disappeared and Councillor Davis was chairing. And so we missed, there was quite a lot of stuff during that time that was missed. I did put it up on chat and there was a suggestion that we should have adjourned. I did try and interrupt to say what should we do, but can we now safely carry on with this application, or do we need to hear it again? What is your ruling?
My advice is that the minimum requirements of the members should be heard and hear and be heard. Also, the minimum requirements of the application should be broadcast as well. Because of the difficulties along the way, you know, it raises questions whether we can properly make any decision at the moment without restarting.
Right. The other thing is that the speakers were very much calling for a site visit. So I wonder if I'm getting some indications that that's appropriate. Is it appropriate for me to raise that as an option now? That in fact we propose a site visit before questions to the officer.
My advice would be that practical solution to you know.
Okay, so that's a practical solution. Can I have a proposer for a site visit? Eleanor, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I'll propose a site visit, and this would have all the benefit also. We might be able to get a bit more clarity on the legal situation, which may otherwise take rather a long time this afternoon.
Okay,
so I propose a site visit.
Can I have a seconder for the site visit? Hal McPhee, Councillor McPhee. Okay, so apologies to everyone concerned for the technical problems. Some of the public statements were not heard on YouTube. There was definitely a call for a site visit. There's definitely a motion now as a way around this problem, because we will then go through everything again next time. So can I just put that to a vote? Site visit. Councillor Rigby?
For.
Councillor McCabe, for. Councillor McPhee?
For.
Councillor Jackson?
For.
Councillor Hughes?
For.
Councillor Hounsell?
For.
Councillor Hodge?
For.
Councillor Davis?
Or, but can I just say, just to alert people, we did actually hear what the people were saying. The councillors heard. I understand the YouTube problem, but just to reaffirm, we could hear, although it was somewhat confused. So
Yeah.
4 for the site visit after all that.
Thank you. Councillor Craig?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
So that's unanimous. That's site visit then, and then we will fully debate this application again once the committee has had a site visit. So everyone will get a chance to make their points again. So apologies for the technical problems. Apologies to viewers on YouTube, and we will be back again. Can I suggest a quick comfort break again?
Please, I'm getting my asthma, so I need to get my inhaler. So if we can have 5 minutes, please.
5-minute comfort break then. Thanks. And hopefully all will be back to normal in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
It's going to be a physical visit, is it?
That will be discussed. Right, I just check. Can anyone hear me at this point in time? Yeah, thank you, Sally. That's a nod.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I figured out what had happened there. My microphone did not like the loop and switched itself off. So, I'd like to thank the speakers for the MIN. We'll see them in a month's time. And we're moving on to the Western Riverside Development Area.
Matt,
So,
can I just ask, did we also establish that we are going to seek advice?
you want a response to, I think there's definitely a request for a response to the legal briefing that we've heard. So I think that will be something that should be included next time.
I hate to say it, I've got 1 or 2 other legal questions I was going to raise, so I can email them in, and then if we can have an overall legal piece of advice sent round, that'd be really helpful.
Lovely, good. It's always good to keep Simon busy.
Can you hear me? Can I ask something?
As I haven't restarted, you can.
Yes, I'd heard before, just before the break, somebody said, is this going to be a physical site meeting? I just want to establish that this will be it has to be a physical site meeting, because you will not get an impression by not being there. That's the whole point of the site visit. Will this be a physical meeting?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be everyone's preference. We'll wait to see what social distancing rules are in place or not in place, whatever the government decides.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, are we ready to switch over?
You're live, Chair.
Yes, I was expecting some members of the public to the last lot to be. Thank you. That was it. So we move on. Let me just do that, and we move on to the Western Riverside Development Area. And can I invite the case officer, Chris Griggs Trevathan, to present his report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'll share my screen now.
Lovely.
Mike, could you enable screen sharing for me, please? There we go. Hopefully you can see the presentation now. Okay, so item 4 on the agenda is the approval of is for the approval of reserved matters, those matters being scale, appearance and landscaping, for the erection of 2 5-storey blocks comprising 290 student bedrooms with retail floor space on the ground floor, bin and cycle stores, plant rooms and associated landscaping works at the Dick Lovett Garages site on the Lower Bristol Road as part of the Bath Western Riverside Development Area. So in 2010, outline planning permission was granted for the residential redevelopment of the Bath Western Riverside site, which is shown on the screen here. This was a significant permission for over 2,000 dwellings, including 345 student bedrooms, a school, retail uses, other uses, and associated infrastructure. Today, we're focusing on a reserved matters application, specifically in this area of the site, which we'll zoom in a minute. So it comprises 2 blocks. This is from the outline planning permission, so it's blocks 32 and 33, as shown on the approved outline planning permission. This plan is quite useful as it's the parameter plan that was approved as part of the outline planning permission, and it indicates the number of stories that was intended for these blocks, so that's 5 on both blocks, and the minimum floor levels and the height parameters for both buildings. layout and access were approved as part of the outline planning permission. So only the matters of scale, appearance and landscaping remain to be determined. This was approved back at the end of 2010, so it has been a significant length of time since that approval. But just to give you an idea of the permission, this is the land use plan that was approved as part of that permission. And using the legend here, you can see that these two blocks, the L-shaped block, which is 32, and the rectangular block, which is 33, were approved for a combination of student housing and student housing with retail or GP surgery, shop, cafe, etc. ground floor level. You'll notice that there was also a third block of student accommodation approved in this location here, but the site we are looking at only contains these two blocks here. So moving on to the site that we're considering today, it's this site here, which is the Dick Lovett mini garage site. The Dick Lovett BMW site is just to the west. There's currently 3 buildings on the site, the Dick Lovett mini sales room and garage here. There's a small single-story office building at the front site here, and then there's a larger workshop car storage building on the western boundary. And then the rest of the site is covered in car storage. The site is within the World Heritage Site. It's also within flood zone 2 and 3, and it's part of the Lower Bristol Road Air Quality Management Area as well. So here, again, you can see the existing buildings on the site. It's adjacent to the east is another car garage, that's the Ford Allen garage, and then you've got the Kia garage further beyond that, and then the Belvoir pub or Beaver pub to the east, and then to the west you've got the Dick Lovett BMW garage and their associated parking. To the north you've got the former Gaslands, which forms part of the wider Bath Western Riverside site, and some of the parking from the Ford Allen and the Kia garage also extends along this area up here as well. And then opposite the site on the other side of Lower Bristol Road, this plan, this aerial photography is a bit out of date, as this is Bath Press, which has now been demolished with the exception of the facade, which has been retained, and that's situated on the side here. Just to note as well, the site does fall within an allocation for Western Riverside as set out in the placemaking plan, which is allocated for a high density residential redevelopment. So whilst this site does sort of appear slightly in isolation today, the principle of redevelopment of the wider area, and there are proposals coming forward in the wider area, should be held in mind when looking at these proposals as well. So just to give you a bit more context before launching into the plans, there's some photographs of the site. This is the looking west along the Lower Bristol Road. You can see the retained facade of Bath Press on the left-hand side of the screen, with where the factory would have been right on the far left there. And then the forecourt and buildings for the Kia garage site and the Ford Allen site just beyond that. This is the existing mini showroom and garage site building here. So we're looking along the eastern boundary of the site along the area here. This is just further to the west, looking across the site, so we can see that workshop building that I referenced on the western boundary over here, the little office building on the left-hand side of the screen, and the mini sales room on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see the parking dominates, and hard standing dominates the majority of the site. There is a slight change in levels at the rear of the site, and there's a retaining structure that runs along the rear portion of the site as well. Just another view from Lower Bristol Road, that small office building on the left there, again looking at the car storage across the site. This is looking back from in front of that little office building to the east, so you can see mini garage on the left, Ford garage right in the centre of the picture, and the rest of Lower Bristol Road on the right hand side of the picture there. This is looking from Lower Bristol Road towards the workshop building on the western boundary of the site. You can also note in the background, you can see the phase 1, stage 1 of the Bath Western Riverside site, and the one of the larger buildings opposite the Destructor Bridge. Then west, again, you can orientate yourself with the workshop building. This is the western boundary of the site, looking at it across the forecourt for the BMW, Dick Lovett BMW site to the west. You can see the trees that are along the boundary there. They are actually off-site trees, but will be retained. Another view west, you can see in the distance there, Spring Wharf, the recently completed development on the corner of the Windsor Bridge Road and Lower Bristol Road Junction. And then just looking back east, so again, retained facade of Bath Press on the right-hand side, Ford Allen garage right in the centre of the picture, and right on the left-hand side is the BMW garage with the actual application site falling in between. There's also a bus stop directly outside the site. And then one final view. This is just further from the east again, looking back towards the site from the other side of the road. You can see the mini garage in the centre of the picture with the workshop building there. And also in the distance, you can see the highest point of the Spring Wharf development on the junction of Lower Bristol Road and Windsor Bridge Road. So all three buildings that are currently on the site would be demolished as part of the planning application. And as I said, the trees along the which are actually off-site would be retained. And the two proposed buildings to be erected would follow the layout in the approved outline permission. There was some concern about the proximity of those buildings as shown in the outline permission to the road, and concern that the scale of the building would mean that would appear overbearing and have a tunnelling effect on the Lower Bristol Road. Within the confines of what was approved as part of the outline consent, which did to a degree fix the layout, whilst maintaining the same L-shaped and rectangular shaped block, the applicant has revised the scheme and slightly shifted the angle of the building away from the road, which has resulted in a distance of between 7 and 8 metres from the road edge to the facade of the building, which just for comparisons purposes, the BMW building to the west here is 6 metres from the road edge. And the existing mini building on the site is 16 metres back from the road edge. So there's a bit of variation there. The ground a bit longer, as you can see, these areas in yellow here and here are shown as the ground floor retail areas within the proposed development. There's a large central courtyard, which would be an outdoor amenity space for the potential student occupiers. Access would be via the central, for the students would be via the central courtyard, where they've got access to cycle stores, bin stores in both the buildings, and then access to the upper floors of the building as well. The shifting of the building line has also actually enabled the inclusion of 5 relatively small street trees to the road frontage, which is considered a positive addition made through the application process. And then the upper 4 floors all have this same layout and comprise a mixture of cluster and studio student bedrooms in this sort of arrangement here. And then just moving on to the elevations. So as originally submitted, this is the originally submitted elevation that came in with the application. And officers were concerned that the design was technically within the parameters established at the outline stage, resulting in a fairly bland, indistinct building, which was quite monolithic and not very well articulated. A combination of brick and fibre cement boarding were the proposals, with a mansard roof which was flat across its top. So actually a very large building. So through the application process and through consultation with the conservation officer, it was decided that actually it would be better if the proposals could be amended to better reflect the industrial heritage of the site in this part of Bath, which is often an overlooked part of Bath's heritage. These are some old photographs from the Bath Western Riverside area. As you can see, there's a mixture of different types of industrial buildings, most of which, with the exception of the Bath Press facade, have now gone. But in many respects are reflective of Bath's industrial heritage. And And the revised design that was submitted sought to pick up on those aspects. And in officers' views, we feel that that has been done so successfully. The inclusion of repetitive pitched roof forms echoes those previous buildings that did used to occupy this area of Bath, and gives the building a bit more rhythm, helps to articulate that roof, gives it a proper roof form, and creates a bit more vertical division along the facade as well, helping to break down what is otherwise a very large building. So that's the south elevation onto Lower Bristol Road. It's a combination of brick and stone. There have been some concerns flagged by the landscape officer about the colour of the brick, and it's proposed that that would be reserved to a condition so that a more muted tone, multi-tonal sort of brick, perhaps still red, but perhaps less stark than could be secured. Then moving to the west elevation, so again, repetition of the similar design along here. And then the north and east elevations, again, reflecting that repetition of gables. So just finally, then I'll move on to some photo montages. This is a view from the north of Bath looking back across the site. So if you focus your attention to this area of the picture, you can see the building there as proposed. So I'll just flick back and forward a couple of times so you can see. This is from the west of Bath, looking back towards Bath West and Riverside, and you can see the Royal Crescent there. The building will appear in this sort of area here if you look closely. So you can see the gables cropping up in those views with the articulated roof form. Then some more local views, which are a bit more stark. So this is obviously from Lower Bristol Road. And then finally from the junction of Lower Bristol Road and Windsor Bridge Road and Brook Road back to the east. So that's the final slide. The officer recommendation is to permit the application subject to the conditions in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions after the speakers.
You're mute again, Matt. You're mute.
My incompetence this time, sorry. So we have three speakers. I have Joanna Robinson from Bath Preservation Trust first, and then Daniel Weaver, the agent, and then Councillor June Player at the end. So Joanna Robinson from Bath Preservation Trust.
Hello again. Bath Preservation Trust acknowledges that the layout, height and function of the proposed buildings has already been consented within the parameters of the overall master plan. However, we have the following concerns with the appearance of this scheme with regards to its design in relationship with the surrounding townscape and its contextual setting. The development site is located within a primary residential two-storey area along the Lower Bristol Road, set back significantly from the riverside along the southernmost edge of the master plan boundary. Due to the site setting at the inland southern edge of the Western Riverside development, its industrial-inspired appearance is fundamentally incongruous with the context, does not suitably demonstrate an understanding of the area, and is not locally distinctive in its form, material or detail. The proposed use of red brick would be over-dominant within its setting and would negatively impact the existing, largely harmonious use of Bath stone through the conspicuous introduction of a new material and colour palette. Camden Mill remains one of the only historic uses of red brick along the Lower Bristol Road to the far west of the proposed development site and does not actively contribute to the development site's immediate context. While we appreciate the design and access statement's exploration of intangible heritage of the site, we do not feel that the extant material heritage of the Lower Bristol Road area is suitably reflected in the consequent overuse of red brick. While acknowledging that the layout and height of the site has been consented, we remain concerned regarding the close proximity of the building's south elevation to the road and pedestrian pavement, as well as the addition of an extra half-storey in roof fenestration to the previously proposed 5 storeys. The roadside block would consequently dominate and box in the streetscape, in sharp contrast to the current low density of the existing site and the predominant 2- and 3-storey residential height of the surrounding townscape, an effect that would be exacerbated by the upcoming 4- to 5-storey development of the Bath Press directly opposite. Bath Preservation Trust continues to question the viability of student housing on this scale. Therefore, we would encourage the consideration of future-proof design that considers the long-term flexibility of interiors and external amenity space and the ease of adapting the space to alternative uses in the future. Ultimately, we call for this application to be refused on the grounds of the poor design, which fails to reinforce local distinctiveness and local townscape character. Approval would only result in a standalone building that is architecturally and materially detached from the distinctive architectural aspects of its localised environment and the wider World Heritage Site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Daniel Weaver to speak, please? Daniel, are you there?
I'm there, Chair. I'm just trying to get the video to work. Okay. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Oh, start my video. I think I'm here.
There we go.
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah. Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the opportunity, firstly, to address you all. My name's Daniel Weaver from Pegasus Group, the agent for the application. The scheme was submitted following extensive pre-application work, and it came into formally in November 2019. Following extensive negotiations, the application, we're pleased, has got a positive recommendation. And I thank your officers for their very constructive input throughout the process that has undoubtedly resulted in a higher quality scheme than when originally submitted. As your officer confirms, the principle of student use is established by the Outline Planning Permission. This application is only seeking approval for scale, appearance and landscaping. The scheme complies with the approved land use plan at outline stage, with the overall scale and footprint in broad accordance with the agreed parameters set. The design has been subject to substantial change, as explained by our officer, with feedback that the appearance should be amended so to respond to the industrial character of this part of the city, with our architects spending extensive time resulting in a scheme that I think is of suitable quality, with pitch roof forms, the use of brick and blue layer stone. The Conservation Officer is fully supportive of the scheme from a design perspective. The proposed landscaping represents a well-considered mix of hard and soft treatment, with substantial trees planted to the lower Bristol Road, and equally the provision of attractive amenity space for future occupiers within the internal courtyard. The scheme complies with current standards with regard to car parking and cycle parking, and consistent with the outline consent that confirm no parking for student use is required, with cycle provision provided to the adopted standards. These measures will encourage the use of sustainable transport modes, minimising carbon emissions and the impact upon climate change. The submitted sustainability construction checklist confirms the proposals will provide a 30% reduction in carbon emissions, and as such is fully compliant with adopted policy. In conclusion, I thank your officers for their constructive dialogue throughout the application process and hope you can support the officer's recommendation and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. Councillor June Player. June, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes, and can see you now.
Thank you. I can see myself as well. Thank you. Right. First of all, I totally endorse all the comments by Miss Robinson. I am not objecting to the principle of development on this site, but I request please that a site visit is done before any decision is made so that you may see for yourselves the impact of the considerations I am about to raise. I have to accept that this proposal will provide yet more student accommodation, but I do fear that it is being imposed upon us because of a decision made 10 years ago, and a lot has changed in that time. However, all I am left with is the chance to request that what is built here is the best it can be for Bath, and that we try to minimise any harmful impact. This requires considering the lives of the occupants to be, residents and all those travelling along the Lower Bristol Road, which is one of the main gateways into the World Heritage City. I used to be proud to say I lived in Bath and was uplifted by all the wonderful architecture, open spaces, parks and views. But now, 20 years on, I sadly no longer feel quite this way. The Lower Bristol Road is in great danger of becoming a roofless tunnel flanked with towering, monotonous looking developments that are completely unrelated to their setting, lack any real architectural merit and are not worthy of our city. And we are in the midst of a climate emergency and told we should be walking more for the sake of our own health and that of the planet. Yet proposals such as this are preventing this and doing nothing to promote it. Before passing this proposal, we need to ensure that there are suitable and pleasant walking routes. How many of you have actually walked along the Lower Bristol Road around here recently, and would you choose to do so? It is extremely busy and noisy, and I can assure you from personal experience that it is a far from pleasant one. And if done on a regular basis, is very damaging to one's health, especially chest problems and hearing. This proposal, with its tall buildings and using unsuitable coloured materials which will make it stand out like a sore thumb, located so close to the narrow pavement, will only contribute to the worsening situation here. I agree a slight change from the original plans has been made to move the buildings back a bit, but it does not go far enough to be of any real value. Many of the historic buildings along here, which are only about 3 stories high, are set back considerably some distance away. The houses have decent sized front gardens and businesses like Lidl and the car showrooms have wide frontages, some with plantings. How Rosebery Wharf on the corner of Windsor Bridge ever got accepted, I just do not know. And that is a clear example of why development should not be built so high with lost important views and right up to the pavement. One of the few exceptions to this is, of course, the Bath Press, directly opposite this site. Its facade has been deemed historically important and so must be retained. So this proposal in its current form regarding its heightened situation will create a serious tunnelling effect along this stretch of the Lower Bristol Road, as the buildings behind the Bath Press will actually be higher than the facade that you just saw. It is well known that this part of the Lower Bristol Road suffers from high pollution levels. This proposal will heighten this pollution and it will not be able to dissipate so quickly and noise levels will be increased. This could be avoided though by setting the proposed blocks further back, widening the pavement to allow for social distancing and putting in extra trees and bushes along the pavement side. If this opportunity is missed now, then it is lost forever. This would also contribute to enhancing the locality and in some small way contribute to Baines's ecological emergency only declared last month. Surely this decision is worthy and necessitates a site visit, and surely we can learn from our past mistakes and not keep repeating them and be able to request some concessions that will address the issues I have raised, whilst showing respect and concern to the locality, residents, travellers, walkers, and help safeguard the city's heritage status, which I fear we may lose if we carry on permitting developments such as this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clare. We move to questions to the officers. I have Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't think I was first, actually, but fine.
Oh, sorry. Do you want Councillor Rigby? Sorry, you were first. Thank you, Councillor Craig.
I'll go first. Sorry, Councillor Craig. I have 2 questions for you, Chris. First of all, and obviously I'm aware that the outline planning's already been given and the limits of what we're looking at. I would just like to ask the question about, for quite a few of the applications that we've seen, we've talked about viability, and I appreciate they've been full applications. What we've also seen is that viability studies have been updated as we've gone along. Is there any way that we can look at the viability of this on the grounds that building such a large purpose-built student accommodation may not to be quite, maybe not seen as quite the attractive option as it was 10 years ago when outline was given. And my second question is, the application I understand was put in November 2019, which is pre-COVID. And because there's been a lot of talk already about how close it is to the pavement, is there anything we can do to say that in terms of social distancing, as an emergency measure, we now can actually insist that there's bigger pavements because people do need to keep a social distance more? So those are my two questions. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. In terms of the viability issue, this is a reserved matters to an outline consent. So in this instance, there's no scope to sort of start diving into the viability. I think the point to make there really is that the applicant would likely not be promoting a block of student accommodation if they didn't think it was viable. But as I said, it doesn't really fall for this committee to determine the viability of the scheme or not on this reserved matters application. In terms of the second question about social distancing and is there anything we can do regarding increasing the size of the pavement width, in the presentation, the applicant has already made some amendments to the scheme to slightly shift the layout or the building line. They have to be sort of careful in how they do that because layout is a matter that's already approved. So the building line as approved in the outline consent is already approved. This is just so the scope for doing that is very limited, and I feel we've already shifted the building line as much as possible within that approved outline consent. So any further shift, you would be looking at a building which is fundamentally a different layout to that that's already been approved, and so that would not be within the ambit of the outline consent, and therefore the applicant is not going to pursue that because they wouldn't get permission for that. So that's the answer to your question, unfortunately. Although, as I said, the distance from the road edge to the building facade is now between 7 and 8 metres, which is a substantial distance, significant enough to allow social distancing for pedestrians, buggies, people in wheelchairs, etc., to pass safely. And the introduction of the street trees as well into that space helps make it a slightly more pleasant environment for pedestrians as well.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Craig. Thank you for your honesty and your integrity.
Right. Thank you, Chair. So a couple of questions. Krista, could you just, for the benefit of the public as much as anything, explain where design starts and layout finishes, given that we've got a reserved, a planning permission has been granted here. And I'm thinking again about the proximity and sort of block feeling of the building against the road, because reserved matters we are allowed to talk about design, but I just want to be clear where design and layout, where the cut-off is.
Yes, of course, Councillor Craig. So there are generally 5 reserved matters. Access, which is fairly obvious, is to do with pedestrian and vehicle access to a site. Layout, which is how buildings are arranged in terms of their footprint and how they're arranged on site. Scale, which is the height, generally speaking, and the depth and the width of those buildings. And then you're left with appearance and landscaping. Appearance covers matters of building form, fenestration design, materials, all those other aspects that aren't scale or layout are covered in appearance. And then there's landscaping, which is the spaces around the building, so hard and soft landscaping, so planting, hard landscaping, pavements, access to the building, well, not access, but all the hard landscaping that goes around the building. So in terms of what you can consider in this application, as I said, layout is fixed. So the locations of these buildings are fixed. Their scale, the fact that scale is a reserved matter does enable some shifting of the widths and heights of the building, but that is again within the context of an approval, an outline consent, which had these buildings shown as 5-storey buildings in this location as being acceptable. And then obviously in terms of appearance, you're less inhibited there. So in terms of the design approach, so the materials, what the building looks like, the form of the building, so that's the form of the roofscape and the way it's shaped, that is still to be determined. And then the landscaping, so how the spaces around the building are treated, that is also up for discussion and consideration as part of this application. So hopefully that helps. I appreciate that it's quite difficult to separate in your mind those matters that are fixed and those that are not, because some are sort of semi-fixed in the sense that there was an approval already given for certain parameters, and this application has to be substantially in accordance with those parameters, but there is a little bit of wiggle room. Other matters you're less inhibited on, as I said, appearance and landscaping. But hopefully that gives you an idea of what we can start to consider.
It does, thank you. And the second thing, I just wanted to have I wonder if you could get a presentation up again. I wanted to have a look at the views, before and after views from Brook Road and also from the Regency, from each end of the Bristol Road, just the before and afters again, please.
Yep, I can do that. Bear with me. So hopefully you can see this is the view from Lower Bristol Road from the east, looking back across the site. So that's obviously the proposed. So I'll just flip back a couple of times for your benefit. And then moving on to the junction with Lower Bristol Road, Brook Road. Okay, hopefully that is helpful. Would you like to see any more?
No, I've seen enough, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson, did you have questions for the officer?
Yes, I think that was very helpful, those two slides that we've just seen, but I haven't quite established in my mind what the building will look like from the other side. I mean, we've got concerns about what it looked like on the Lower Bristol Road, very blocky and quite frankly like Digbeth in the middle of Birmingham. But then I thought that the Western Riverside architecture wasn't very great either. So if I could, I'm trying to see how it will locate in my mind if you're on the Western Riverside looking towards the Lower Bristol Road and you're looking at the back of this building. That's the first question. And the second question is this matter of height. I do think the Twerton Mills student accommodation and the Bath Spa student accommodation that are further down the road have worked very well. How does this compare in terms of height and bulk to those two?
Okay, so for your first question, it's probably best I share my screen again. I'll just show you the elevation. So from the north, so from the Bath Western Riverside side, which directly to the north of this application site is part of Bath Western Riverside, which hasn't been developed yet. But this is the north elevation. So essentially you would be seeing the end of, this is the rectangular building, B33, and then the end of the L-shaped building, which also goes across the front of the courtyard there. That would be B32. So that's the elevation from the north side. Just to give you, again, a little bit of context there, if I go back to the approved site location plan. So that was always envisaged as the layout. the master plan for the outline consent included a row of townhouses here, so they backed onto here. So it wasn't that this was a sort of open space where you would be looking onto those end elevations of this building. So hopefully that gives you what you need there. In terms of your question around Twerton Mill and the Bath Spa, I assume you were referring to some of the Unite buildings and blocks to the west. Twerton Mill is 4 stories in height with a pitched roof form. It varies across the building, but it is roughly 4 stories in height. Then the Unite student blocks further to the west, the other side of the junction with Windsor Bridge Road, they are 4 stories as well with a variety of roof forms. And then obviously we have Spring Wharf on the corner of the Windsor Bridge Road and Lower Bristol Road Junction. That varies between sort of 4, 5 and at its highest point 6 stories with a variety of roof forms, including a sawtooth roof. So hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor Jackson.
Yes, that's very helpful indeed. I had thought it was sort of bigger than those two, but the other thing is, have I understood correctly that the Pinegate development, that student block there, is not now happening? So the density on the Lower Bristol Road may not be quite as great as we had thought.
So the Pinesgate development to the east, that was did have 2 buildings on it, which I believe were 6 and 7 stories in height. That permission has not been commenced and it has now expired. So any development there would have to come forward via a new planning application.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any further questions for the officer? We move to the debate and Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Chair. There are many concerns with respect to this application relating to what is needed by the city now compared to 10 years ago when an outline application was accepted. This application for reserve matters where we are to focus on this is for reserve matters where we are to focus specifically on the scale, appearance and landscaping. I'd like to propose a motion that this committee overturns the officer's recommendation and rejects this application, because I believe it's not compliant with planning policy in terms of the design and appearance of the development and its impact on the character and appearance of the wider area and the World Heritage Site. I note that 2 consultees, the Bath Preservation Trust and the Landscape Officer, both objected to this proposal on these grounds. On account of the design, materials and height, the buildings will be dominant in the landscape and harm the views into and across the World Heritage Site. Whilst it is noted that parameters for acceptable height of this development have been set, this development proposal does not respect these limits and exceeds the height. Block B33 is 0.5 metres exceeding, and the bigger block, B32, will exceed them by 1.8 metres. Comments about the architecture have included that it is ugly and of no architectural merit. Whilst it is supposed to be a nod to the industrial heritage of Bath, most of the industrial buildings were historically located on the water's edge or in the quays area. Anywhere architecture, I feel, is a good term for what this development would represent. Even taking into account the workaday environment of the Lower Bristol Road, this mostly red brick, very large building will be very dominant and stand out, and I believe it will have a negative impact in this setting. I ask that colleagues consider voting to reject this application.
Okay, so we have a motion to reject this application. Can I have a seconder? Is there anybody willing to second? I've got Councillor Jackson. Yeah. Ooh, lots of hands going up. Councillor Jackson, you were first. Do you want
Well,
to add
I think Councillor Hodge has really stated the problem very well. If this was not such a dominant building, we could perhaps vote for it, but as it is, it's just too much. And also, I would question whether a retrospective design to look like something like Birmingham in the 19th century is appropriate anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Before we move to the vote, then the debate may continue. well, I had, oh no, that's okay. I've got Councillor Hughes.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, Councillor Hodge actually already covered the areas that I had of concern. And in fact, I mean, it wasn't, it was the last two slides of that presentation that really brought it home as to how awful this will look on the landscape and how out of place it looks within the Lower Bristol Road. So I would have been happy to have supported the Lucy on there.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McPhee. It's all right, you are unmuted already.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, when I saw the slide the first time and that came up, I went, wow. But then when it came up again and I was shown it again, it still just hits you between the eyes. It's the wrong colour and it's too big. So I support the motion.
Okay, and I've got, happy to second, I've got Councillor Rigby.
Thank you. I don't want to put words in Councillor Hodges' mouth, but in terms of our reasons for refusal,
yeah.
I think what, certainly why I will be absolutely backing her motion, and my reasons, and they may be hers, but she may have different ones, are around the scale, which we're allowed to talk about, and the massing, which I think is too high. I also have an issue with the design and materials. Because I appreciate that what is being attempted is a nod to the industrial past, but I think that is less than successful. So my reasons for refusal will be around the scale and massing and the design way that it's being presented.
Thank you. Can I add? Oh, Councillor Hodge. Hang on. I was just trying to get as many reasons for refusal for you, Richard, as we can. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I think overall it's contrary to B4 in terms of the World Heritage Site, and the design policies are D1 urban design, D2 local character and distinctiveness, D3 urban fabric, and D5 building design. I think that picks up all those points that Amanda has mentioned.
I can add a failure to respond to the local context. Councillor Craig, though, you wanted to add something?
Right, mine's been covered, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just add another one?
You've got another one? Okay, come on.
Impact on the World Heritage Site.
Impact on the World Heritage Site. So some of these possibly relate to the outline, Rich, but you got what you need for the reserve matters.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just clarifying, because as Chris set out at the start, we are a bit inhibited by the outline, the parameters of the outline application. So we just need to be careful that if we are going for a reason for refusal and overturning the officer recommendation, that it is within the remit of what we can consider for this application. So I think I've picked up scale, massing, design materials, failure to respond to the local context, the rationale being the impact on the local area and the impact on the World Heritage Site. And Councillor Hodge, you cited relevant policy reasons. So I think that that's within the remit of what we could consider this application on. I don't think we're conflicting ourselves with the parameters set on the outline application.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not for us to redesign the building. We have to judge what we've got in front of us. But given that this is student accommodation, you know, excited young things looking forward to the 21st century, if they haven't got there already, I would actually be quite happy with a really modern design, something that actually was different. So it's not, I'm against the principle of development on this site. It's just this particular design is too bulky, and as has been said, massing, scale and so on.
Okay, moving towards a vote. Was there any further? Oh, Rich, did you want to?
Sorry, I was just going to say, so the recommendation that you'd be voting on is to delegate to officers to refuse for the reasons cited?
For the reasons given.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything further? Nothing further. Okay, let's move to a vote alphabetically this time. So to delegate to refuse, Councillor Clark.
Well, I support the motion, so that's 4 then.
4, yeah. Councillor Craig.
4.
4. Councillor Davis.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Hodge.
4.
Councillor Hounsell.
4.
Councillor Hughes.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
Come on.
I don't know.
Didn't hear you, Eleanor. No, you're muted. 4.
4.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee.
4.
Councillor McCabe. 4. Councillor Rigby.
4.
4. Thank you very much. I think that's 8 with 1 abstention. Marie, is that right?
9 in favour and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
I'll work out how many people are on the committee one day. Thank you very much. That's Delegate. Thank you for all of those of you who came to speak. Thank you, Councillor Player. And now we've taken the vote, I have to say, I do feel the urge to criticise the original outline application, and I do acknowledge that the applicant in that case did their best in terms of the landscaping and the design, but I think the original application causes permanent harm to that stretch. The original outline permission causes harm to that stretch of the approach into the city. I think it's a section that the local context is of buildings set back from the road, both the Georgian Terrace, the car showrooms, but there is the pub that comes to the front, the BMW garage comes quite close, and there's the shops down the far end that come up to the road. And I think I can't understand how that original outline was granted permission, but that was long before my time. But I hope that something more positive will come back, and I do urge the developer to come back with something that responds to the issues we've raised. We haven't quite used up an hour. Can we carry on to Cleveland Bridge, or does anybody need a little break? Carry on to Cleveland Bridge. Okay, I'm sure this won't take long. Thank you very much for that one. And we move on to Cleveland Bridge. Can I invite the case officer, Caroline Power, to present her report? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for offering to carry on. I'm going to try and attempt to share my screen with you. Forgive me if I don't get it right the first time. I'm so out of yes, I'm going to have to log on again. Sorry.
Okay.
And appreciated how long. Would you mind if I have a quick break to just get myself back in to the system?
You do what you need to do.
Thank you.
In the meantime, we'll all draw pictures of Cleveland Bridge on our notepad, shall we?
Inside.
the inside, yeah.
Right, hopefully you can see that now, can you?
We're still looking at your Windows 10 desktop page selection, the beginning of Citrix.
It's my laptop saying I'm sharing the screen with you, and I'm seeing the first slide.
Oh. Is anybody seeing the first slide?
No.
No. Any technical advice available?
If you allow me.
Yeah, go on. Is that?
It's Kumar.
Kumar, go on then.
Yes. I think when you share a screen on your Zoom, then when you share, there should be when you click on share button, then there should be
Hang on,
small windows. Yes.
Oh, hang on, there you go.
Sorry, my fault. I'm just so green at using this system. Does everyone see that now?
Yeah, we're on a title slide.
Excellent. That's the first slide, item 5, which is for the refurbishment, repair and strengthening of Cleveland Bridge. And forgive me, it was pointed out to me yesterday that the wards are both Bathwick and Walcott for this particular item. There's also some updates in the update report, which I imagine you've all been able to see. So I won't concentrate on those, but please be aware that I am proposing an amendment to one of the conditions to put in place the need for the developer to come back to us with the phasing as well as the samples and materials, etc. for this proposal. It's a listed building application, and it relates to a grade 2 star listed bridge called Cleveland Bridge, which is spans the River Avon and connects the northwest to the southeast side of the city. This slide particularly shows all the historic listed buildings and structures in the vicinity of the site. The site is also within the conservation area and World Heritage Site, and also is on the route of the SAC, which is between Bradford and Avon and Bath for bats. This is just a slide to remind you of what it looks like. I'm sure you all know very well. It shows in particular, if you can see the curbs that are actually in place at the moment on the bridge, which we'll come back to later in this presentation. So just to give you a brief historic overview of the development of the bridge, this is the first engraving I could get hold of the early structure, which was built in the 1827-28 period. And at the time, it was ahead of its game in terms of technological sort of use of the materials. So we have the stone abutment here on either side of the river with the incorporated into them the toll houses, which, although they look like they're single story from the deck, are actually 3 stories and go right down to the river banks here. Quite impressive structures in their own right, if you ever get a chance to go inside one. The actual span of the bridge is about 30 meters, sorry, and it's a single span of iron at that time. And you can see it's quite an ornate structure with a very decorative parapet with balustrading along this area. And that was actually called the New Bridge when it was first built. Subsequent to that, we have in 1929, the concrete box girder structure that was added to reinforce the iron work. This isn't the most beautiful of structures, I have to admit. And obviously was clearly put in before the bridge was ever listed or conceived of being listed. It's a concrete which is reinforced with steel, and that will be quite relevant to the discussions in this presentation. The final bit of this jigsaw is the 1992 edition, which is a steel sort of framework which also supports the underside of the decking and reinforced the concrete structure, which is nearly 100 years old now, and the original. So we have 3 phases, if you like, of different adaptations of the bridge. This photograph particularly shows all three elements, well, 4 in fact, if you count the stone. So the abutments are here, looking quite robust. They have had some intervention already in this area and throughout the sort of line of this concrete girder and then the metalwork from the 1992 intervention. But clearly the original, iron work is still clearly visible externally. So a brief summary of the existing condition of the bridge. Apart from the sort of obviously sort of cosmetic issues attached to flaking paint or lack of paint, actually, as it turns out, most of the balustrading has lost its original colour scheme and is just down to the metalwork. And mortar loss in the abutments here, and some need to reinstate masonry. The major issue here is the leaking deck and deterioration of the balustrade, but in particular water penetration that has gone through the deck, which is a modern structure, into the concrete Warren structure, as it's called, the 1929 structure, which has caused a lot of corrosion and damage to that structure. And these photographs are just evidence of that particular issue. Clearly, the problem is here where the reinforced steel inside the concrete members has become rusty. I think it's some sort of chemical reaction with a chloride reaction here. And that has in turn led to the rust blowing the actual surface of the concrete. And so this is what's happening generally over the whole of that particular structure, unfortunately. So this is the list of works that are proposed in this application. They are a combination of repairs and some reinforcement and some alteration. And I will go through each of those individually. So the beginning of that is where the problem is really starting is this poor water management at decking level, which has resulted in the concrete below having all this problem with the steel rusting. There's also an issue with the channels here where water is managed and channeled. And when this was put in the 1990s, this particular feature, it's been found it wasn't done particularly successfully. And part of the proposal is to redo these channels either side of the carriageway to make more efficient exit for the water coming off the road and pavements. This is where the technical side of things gets a little bit more complicated and from my point of view is a little bit beyond my understanding of how you deal with this type of corrosion in concrete and steel, because it's a modern feature really and doesn't normally come into the sort of historic building issues. But from what I've been told, the engineers involved in this particular scheme are using maritime technology where ships have similar problems with lots of water penetration into their hulls, and this is the sort of repair technique that's used for ship repairs that's the engineers are now saying they will apply to the bridge. And here you can see it's some sort of chemical anodes are applied to the surface of the concrete, which then in turn stops the anti-corrosion or anti-carbonization of the steel inside the concrete. So quite clever stuff. And here is a scene that is very typical, I'm afraid, of the underside of the bridge. And this is how the proposed repair will take place. So this is a section through a beam showing the existing reinforced steel surrounded by concrete. The anodes will be attached to the outer sort of edge of the concrete beams, and then they'll be recoated in a very thin layer of concrete. This will obviously enlarge the circumference of each of the beams that are treated in this way, and the result will be a slightly enlarged structure, which is not very easy to detect in this sort of scale of drawing. The other intervention will be with the form of the fibre reinforced polymer plates, which are going to go on the underside of the deck itself. These will do a double act in the sense that they will help to prevent water penetration, but they will also help to strengthen the deck itself. This is a modern material, and but it will be on the underside of the deck, which is also a modern structure. And I've been told that they are very slim and will not be visible from below because of the other structures that intervene between that area and the bottom of the bridge structure itself. So those are the two main interventions to the lower structure of the bridge. This is the artistic attempt to show what the bridge structure is like at the moment with this concrete girder structure that has obviously seen better days. As I said, it's nearly 100 years old now, so it's beginning to show its age. And what the proposed improvements will be once the anodes are attached to stop the further rusting of the interior steelwork. And they're proposing to put on this unified colour concrete coating to try and improve the visual appearance at this level. This is just to show the sort of condition of the stone abutments. You can see they've been discoloured over time with all the sort of leaching into the stone from the metalwork above. Birds and other animals also don't help in what they do perching on the bridge, and so there's a general sort of need to clean the stonework and to do some sort of localized repointing and masonry repairs where appropriate. The applicants have come back and said that they are quite content that the main structures of the stone abutments are in reasonable order and don't need any, there's no sign of any major cracking or movement to warrant the need for any further or more intensive repairs than the ones they're proposing. The drainage issues I mentioned on the decking itself next to the carriageway are going to be rejigged. They won't appear to be any different on the pavement level once they're done, but clearly you can see from these photos what damage they are doing at the moment. So that will be part of the scheme. And as I mentioned earlier, this wonderful decorative finish that the original building bridge had at the balustrade level. Some of these roses are missing, and the paintwork will be reinstated back to its, what we believe it may have been green and black in the Victorian period, but we don't know what it was originally painted. So unfortunately, all the paints just disappeared, and this is the most recent colour, which is a white. Anyway, we'll need to have further discussions about that through a condition about the colour scheme. One of the final changes to the bridge will be the intervention of putting the curb or extending it and realigning it in front of the Doric columns to the temples of the toll houses. And this is for obvious reasons after the last problem we had with damage from a vehicle collision of one of the toll houses, and the whole of the front of one toll house had to be reconstructed. So the proposal is to take this iron, it's an iron designed curb, which was carried out in the 1990s as part of that work. And it was designed by a specialist firm who specialised in his heritage called Dorothea. They designed that curb to make it look visually like a sort of historic curb. So this will be taken down in front of the base of these columns and terminate with the same detail round about here. The realignment of the road will mean, or sorry, of the curb, I beg your pardon, will mean that the actual carriageway will lose about 100 mil of the road in order to take the curb alongside and not disrupt the actual columns, because you can see it's quite tight here. But in doing that, the highways are intending to improve the quality of the pedestrian access past these columns, and the actual road carriageway itself will remain to highway standards despite this slight realignment of the curb. This shows just the detail of that. As you can see here where the curb will be extended. And this is a before and after, well, the after picture showing them in place. So you will still see the majority of those columns above the curb, and the curb will give you the added protection needed to counter any vehicle damage, hopefully. The final part of the works is to put in the bird prevention netting, metal netting, where there's lots of cavities inside the bridge to try and curb any bird nesting, etc. activities. And just to recap on the ecology, we've had ecologists looking at this proposal in the light of its problems associated with, or not problems, but issues associated with the bats and other creatures that are known to inhabit this part of the river, including otters. But they have basically looked at the proposals and are happy that the scheme doesn't produce any loss of biodiversity, and it's in accordance with the policy NE3 of the placemaking plan. So finally, just to conclude, my view, but this is the officer's view clearly to you, is that there are occasions when historic building conservation needs to turn to modern technology that can be adapted to suit traditional structures, and through their application cause less intervention than traditional methods. This proposal is an example where the combination of modern and traditional forms of repair and technology should work in harmony to overcome the deterioration and restore this unique listed building. Overall, it is considered that no harm will arise to the character, significance and setting of this designated heritage asset, and is in accordance with policy HE1 of the placemaking plan and section 16 of the MPPF. Thank you. And I'll take any questions that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First up, we have our public speakers and ward councillors. I have 4 speakers for this item. I have first up Keris Humphreys from the Residents Association. Keris?
It currently says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, well, we can hear you loud and clear. So if you start, we should, your picture will appear shortly.
Okay. Right. Just to be clear, I'm representing not only the Pulteney Estate Residents Association, but also the Bridge Residents, the Peaches, and the Federation of Bath Residents Association, which includes a neighbouring association at Bathwick Estate, and some of the associations on the other side of the river. Also to say, I saw a first update, but I've not seen a recent update. So just to be clear. So as a grade 2 star listed building, Cleveland Bridge is one of a tiny minority of listed buildings, and it makes it a nationally important heritage asset. There's an overriding duty to protect and conserve it. We should really be thinking of the next 100 years. The last inspection report in February says that the bridge is overall in a poor state of repair. Preservation and protection from harm should be a priority. The officer's update report, the first one, concedes the works include actual alterations, not just like-for-like repairs. To give you some examples, the increasing the diameter of the elements of the trusses has been mentioned. Many elements, cumulative increase in bulk. The fibre of reinforced polymer under the roadway, the suggestion that that's acceptable because it's a modern part of the bridge is actually at odds with the statement in the officer's report that the 1920s materials are in fact part of the historic fabric. The extending of the raised curbs in front of the colonnades is a very significant change visually. And the reduction in the width of the carriageway, which I understood to be 100 millimetres on each side, is on a road that's already barely wide enough for existing heavy traffic. So those are material alterations apparently made only so the concrete parts can be signed off to allow return of almost 1,000 HGVs a day, which is the DFT figures. The alterations do the opposite of protecting the asset from harm. They serve to allow it to be exposed to harm that will likely become incapable of remedy. This failure to protect is not justified by any public interest as we've set out fully in our written case. The proposals are incompatible with the obligation to protect and conserve the asset. The officer's update still doesn't explain the asserted longevity of the bridge following repairs, and that failure in itself, I suggest, precludes any meaningful consideration of the application. The update also dismisses some arguments as highways matters that do not form part of this application's proposals, but fails to address the fact that application of high loading to the bridge for much of each day is extremely relevant to the council's duty to protect and conserve the bridge. These relentless loadings of stationary and moving heavy vehicles pass not only through the concrete that's to be repaired, but through the fragile antique stonework of the 1820s abutments. The lack of matching full inspection and corresponding levels of care to much of the oldest part of the original fabric, the abutments, is unacceptable treatment of a nationally important heritage asset and doesn't reflect the level of protection and conservation this historic fabric should be receiving. To summarise, the bridge is in poor structural condition. It needs a holistic approach to the plan to repair, which has at its heart the preservation of the bridge, retaining it for future generations of Baines residents and requiring exclusion of the heaviest vehicles. We ask that the application be refused as the current scheme is contrary to the council's duty to protect, conserve and enhance the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. I have councillors, I'm not sure what order you're going in, but I've got it as Councillor Kumar first, and then Councillor Davies.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
And I hope that the host, if they allow, they can allow my video as well. So good evening, rather good afternoon. I speak here as a local Bathwick councillor with an earnest and humblest appeal to outrightly reject this application in current form. I emphasize in current form. If that is not possible, please defer this afternoon, and only after a proper visit by all the members of the Development and Planning Committee, take a very holistic view of it, and then we should make a decision, because any action should not be taken in haste. Particularly, any sort of decision on this application, which is one of the finest archaeological building, a grade 2-star listing building of Bath, which we all are very proud of, and which affects lives of hundreds of residents in Bathwick, Walcott, as well as in Lambridge area, and perhaps on the whole of Bath. Now, why to defer or why to outrightly reject at the moment, and maybe after a visit by everybody among those who are allowed to, and then make a decision, because not enough information has been really provided to all of us for a long-term preservation of this asset. It seems that only the micro aspects has been not considered, and only a holistic macro aspect has been taken care of, with a very simpler view that how hundreds of HGVs they could use this dilapidated bridge. That's the only motto, I think, for repairing of this bridge. Do we want to construct it again just for these HGVs, or we want to preserve this asset properly for perpetual for our posterity? Should we allow these repairs without thinking what kind of heritage and what kind of environment we'll be living for our children, for our grandchildren? As the PERA secretary and other PERA secretary just talked, I'm sorry, with various other hats on, that this construction work should include actual alteration and not a lot, and it should be like for like repairs, which is not the case. I think that the current plans defy the obligation to protect and conserve this invaluable asset, which has fragile, antique, many stoneworks, as we just saw. The committee needs to meet its obligation as well under Section 193 of the NPPF, that when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation. The more valuable the asset, the more importance must be given. My own residents are very highly concerned that the details of the traffic displacement plans were not also provided to them in advance. Schools are going to reopen, and if they are not consulted properly, then about partial or full closure of the bridge, then there could be quite a lot of chaos. While obviously the dilapidated condition of bridge is visible, the illegal environment condition in the neighborhood is not obviously that much visible. So therefore, the plans are there in place for constructing the visible damages, but not for the invisible but illegal environmental conditions. In fact, the council will be exposing itself to the risk as well as for financial liability, I repeat, for financial liability if we return to illegal level of air pollutions, because if we construct this, then loads of vehicles will again pass on. So therefore, commencement of any kind of these kind of works should be properly evaluated against the environmental conditions of the neighborhood. I understand that my time is up. So in a nutshell, I would say that let us not work in haste, and this plan must be at least deferred. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kumar. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your time. I speak to you today to appeal to you as a committee to defer your decision on this application for Cleveland Bridge. Cleveland Bridge is indeed one of Bath's finest architectural assets, which carries a grade 2-star listing. My reasoning for asking for you to defer is due to there being insufficient information being provided to justify the scale of the works proposed, and to also enable the committee to both visit the site and to also consider what further steps could be taken by the committee to preserve this asset for the long term as part of this application. The key question in relation to the first point is, have the proposed works been designed to ensure the long-term conservation of the bridge, which would be the primary purpose of any listed building application under the 1990 Act, or have they been over-specified to enable the bridge to recommence the carrying of the many hundreds of 18-plus-ton lorries which used to pass over it daily until the weight limit was applied earlier this year? Nowhere in the documents presented does this question appear to have been either asked or answered, and there is therefore no means by which we can obtain assurance that the significant works proposed are in fact the appropriate level of intervention required for the preservation of the bridge, or whether the proposed works in fact represent an excessive intervention on the bridge to enable it to carry these heavy vehicles. And the works proposed are indeed very significant, not least of all in relation to the additional concrete being added along the length of each concrete beam, resulting in the enlargement, as we've heard earlier, of the Warren concrete structure, which is now nearly 100 years old. And this work, which the applicant themselves now acknowledges, is not a like-for-like repair. Until sufficient information is provided to enable the committee to address this question, I do not believe that members will be in a position to be able to conclude whether the impact of the works are appropriate and therefore whether the proposal is in accordance with the relevant policies, including specifically section 16 and paragraph 196 of the NPPF. I would also note that we have not seen sight of some other documents referred to in the papers which could be of relevance in considering this application, not least of all the 2012 departure from standard and both the 2014 and 2017 engineering assessments. A deferral would also enable the committee to consider further what steps could be taken to preserve this asset for the long term as part of your consideration of this application. And on this issue, I return again to the issue of the use of the bridge by heavy lorries. It is self-evident from the history of the bridge that the use of the bridge by these vehicles has had an impact on the projected lifespan of this listed asset and are the primary cause for the intervention to which this application relates. At the start of section 16 of the NPPF, it states that assets such as Cleveland Bridge are an irreplaceable resource and should be conserved in a manner appropriate to their significance so that they can be enjoyed for their contribution to the quality of life of existing and future generations. It therefore seems incongruous with such a requirement that whilst considering a listed building consent, which currently facilitates the return of heavy vehicles to using the bridge, that the committee would not also explore ways in which the huge damage which these vehicles will continue to cause could be mitigated in order to ensure the long-term conservation of the bridge. Specifically, I'd ask that the committee take time to consider the use of the powers open to the committee in section 17A of the 1990 Act, which states that the conditions subject to which listed building consent may be granted may include conditions with respect to the preservation of particular features of a building. I would therefore urge the committee to consider whether under these powers it would be possible for the current weight limit to remain in place following the completion of this works as a condition of this application. Indeed, without such a weight limit remaining in place, I do not see how the committee could meet its obligations under section 193 of the NPPF, which states that when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation. For the reasons noted, I would therefore ask that the committee visit the site and defer its decision today to enable these important issues to be considered in more detail. Where the committee wishes to reach a decision today, I would ask that with such issues outstanding, the current application be rejected. I would also like to echo the concerns of my colleague and say that were the works to progress, it is vital that the council gives due consideration to the management of any resulting traffic displacement during the works. This was a huge concern to the number of residents when it was addressed in the previous application, and this application is silent on the matter. And so I would urge the council to engage with local members and residents well in advance of any works to ensure that this traffic displacement issue is managed appropriately.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, you're speaking as a ward councillor now, and then, am I right, you will remove yourself from the rest of the discussion. Is that right?
I will speak as a ward councillor. I won't say anything else, and obviously I won't vote. Okay.
Thank you.
But thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on yet another important application in front of the committee this afternoon. This one differs from the previous ones in that it's just a listed building application with no supporting planning application, therefore falls under the Listed Buildings Act 1990, not the Planning Act. You do not have the information in front of you today to be able to decide whether this application fulfills the criteria of the Listed Buildings Act. Indeed, I would say there are some errors, inconsistencies and omissions, which means any decision today would be unsafe. My colleague Tom has highlighted some of them. It's good that the case officer has acknowledged that the relevant ward was misidentified in part on the report. This isn't just a case of adding the word Walcott into this document in front of you. This extends to the fact that the residents in Walcott were not consulted in the same way that the residents in Bathwick were. However, the bridge is equally in both wards. It is stated that the damage currently caused to the bridge is caused by water ingress. That is partially true, but the full structural report highlights that the water ingress is in turn partially caused by the volume and weight of traffic going over the bridge. You wouldn't know that because the report hasn't been given to you in full as the members responsible for making this decision. In fact, much is made of the fact that no highways matters can be taken into account in this listed building application. Rather, you should just look at listed building criteria. You are being asked to approve a set of measures which will, in quotes, prolong the life of the bridge. I'm no structural engineer, but to me it seems self-evident that the life of the bridge is dependent on what use it is put to. How long will what is being proposed prolong the life? That's stated nowhere in the application. You haven't been told. In fact, if your sole duty under the Act is to preserve the bridge, I believe you need a justification for any works done to it. Where is the document that says the bridge needs work at all if it were protected by keeping heavy traffic off it? You can look to Hammersmith Bridge, a similar structure built 60 years after Cleveland Bridge, and see that the work done to it, far from conserving heritage, has led to its complete closure, as the use it was put to was not considered in the repairs which were done. Please don't make the same mistake as the Hammersmith planners. Indeed, you may wonder if this report is correct, why I have given up my place on the planning committee for this item. I have not expressed any view in public about the listed building application, but I have been very, very vocal indeed about keeping heavy lorries off the bridge. But for me, the two are inextricably interlinked. No preservation of the listed structure can be seen in isolation from its use being put to. And even if you've seen the full recent report, it only looks at the visible bits of the bridge. This report is inconsistent in terms of whether or not this is a like-for-like repair. The update report sent out yesterday says it's not like-for-like. If that is so, where is the planning application? To highlight two elements, the already narrow carriageway is potentially being narrowed by up to 20 centimetres, and the high protective curb is being extended to cover the toll houses. These may well be good things, and I see that today you have seen a visual to demonstrate it. However, Historic England was sent the previous application, which was withdrawn in February, and it did not have these changes in it. Their statement about no objections was, I believe, carried over from the withdrawn application, and I have seen no further literature to see that Historic England have been reconsulted. I feel very strongly that you need to defer this decision till you get all the information you need. And I'd also recommend you take that time for a site visit. As the officer said, it's worthwhile. This is a grade 2 star listed structure, giving it extremely high protection. It's in the conservation area. It is mentioned in our World Heritage listing. Were you to think that despite all the errors and omissions above, you can today make a decision, I could see no way you could prove it as it currently stands. Would you be happy with pouring a lot of concrete into the Royal Crescent to allow HGVs to use it? Can you envisage Venice, the only other city with World Heritage status, so treating one of its listed structures? I know this bridge is different as it currently carries an A road and a strategic link according to the DFT, but hang on, you're being told you can't take any highways matters into account. It can't be had both ways. Either highways matters are relevant, in which case you need to see the usage it will be put to, or they are irrelevant and therefore should not play any part in your decision making, and no justification for what is necessary to protect the heritage asset has been made. I am asking you, committee, to defer your decision. In February, when the previous application was pulled, it was 2 months of any proposed work. Work isn't proposed till next spring, so despite a target determination of September the 3rd, no harm will be done by putting off your decision for a month. If the bridge were so compromised as to be in serious danger of collapse or partial collapse, then surely it would be currently closed to all traffic. In fact, it just has a temporary weight restriction on it, which in and of itself gives weight to the argument that it is the usage of the bridge which is calling it harm. If despite the above you feel you can decide today, I urge you to turn down this application so a better one can be forthcoming. one which does what the 1990 listed building section 66 says. In considering whether to grant permission for development which affects a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority shall have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural or historical interest which it possesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. Can I just ask you to switch your video off as well as your mute your microphone, just in case we have you making positive or negative faces and influencing the other members of the committee. Questions then for the officer, and I have Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I don't know whether now is the right time to say this, but I feel quite uncomfortable listening to the three ward councillors about whether we've got everything that we need here. It seems there are some missing documents, which Councillors Rigby and Davies both mentioned. I'm not sure whether we should have a planning application as well as a listed buildings one. I was going to ask a question about, I don't understand why there is no option to repair the bridge and leave it for local traffic, because surely that should be there, and that's sort of been covered slightly in all of the questions that the ward councillors have raised. So I'd like to actually move that we defer this until all of this stuff can be sorted out and organise a site visit in the meantime.
Okay, let's take a proposal for a
Helen
site.
Ellison.
Proposal for a site visit.
Join the meeting.
Councillor Hodges is happy to second. So proposal for a site visit. Well, that's it. We've also got. So we're going to a vote for a site visit that curtails the debate. Richard, did you want to speak before we vote, or?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. If it's deferring for a site visit, then I think we'll discuss the issues that have been raised through the debate at the next committee meeting. But I think there are relevant clarifications on the scope that can be considered under this application in terms of the listed building application, clarification regarding the need for planning permission, and the position regarding the highways side of things, because there is a bit of a muddle between what we can consider and what we can't consider on this. But I think if it's been deferred to a site visit, those will be relevant for the next committee. So I think if we, I'll let you hold the vote first.
Okay, let's go to a vote for a site visit. I'll go in reverse. Councillor Rigby is excusing herself from this. Councillor McCabe, I'm going to abstain from this. Councillor McPhee. Hal, I can't hear you.
I'm for the visit.
For the visit. Councillor Jackson.
For a visit.
For a visit. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, for a visit.
Councillor Hounsell.
For the visit and the further information.
Councillor Hodge.
For the visit and the extra information stated.
Councillor Davis.
Same, but more information needed.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Okay, so Cleveland Bridge is a site visit. We will.
Sorry.
Councillor, Caroline, did you want to add something?
I just need to say this because I feel quite strongly that if you are going on a site visit, you will not be able to see what I've been showing you in photographic form unless you're on the river or in a cage hoisted underneath the deck.
Well,
it's very difficult to see those things, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's a challenge for Rich then to see if you can procure us a boat.
So can I just come back in on the, there was a few requests there for the additional information. Is it possible to have some clarifications to what information it is that's missing at the moment, so we can either obtain it or clarify the position if that information is already here? Because I think I'm a little bit confused about what information is missing.
Councillor Craig?
Well, what was mentioned by the ward councillor, I think, Councillors Davis and Rigby, were 2012 departure from standard and both the 2014 and 2017 engineering assessment. and also the matter of whether there should be a planning application to go with this listed buildings one.
Yeah, and it's a bridge, so obviously it takes traffic, but highways matters are not part of the consideration. So something that clears up that confusion. The notion that there's a danger that the committee will maybe find itself in the position of taking a decision that actually determines the weight limits for traffic on the bridge, which is, I feel, not part of the committee's remit. So I think
yeah, Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, add anything in now.
Right. What I'm not clear on, obviously I'm not a Bath councillor, NES councillor. What I'm not clear on is whether the damage that's evident with the bridge is because of the water ingress and the rusting metalwork, or whether it's the historic use of the bridge by heavy lorries. So I'm not sure. I want clarity over what is thought by the experts to be causing the damage. Is it the water ingress only, or is it the use of the bridge by the lorries? Or is it that if nothing's done about the water damage and the rusting, would that lead to damage in the future by heavy lorries? So it's really to clarify whether we're trying to rectify damage caused by the historic use of the bridge by heavy lorries, or is it about restoring the bridge because of the water ingress and rusting?
Okay, so we're not going to answer these now because that'll be for the next meeting. Was there anything else anybody wanted to add?
Well, yes, I wanted to know a bit more about the air pollution and whether lead was then mixing with the water and causing damage. But I was most disquieted about the idea of blocking up bird nesting sites. So I would actually like a bit more information about the ecology. It may, of course, be online, but I didn't have time to look for it.
Okay, Councillor Craig, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did. Our responsibility is to not expose the listed buildings in our care to harm. And, you know, I hear what you're saying about this isn't a highways issue, but by allowing the heavy traffic to go over the bridge, if that doesn't expose it to harm, then surely we have to have an option which says, you know, if we do this, it means repairing the bridge and leaving it for local traffic. I don't understand why that option's not in the report. I feel like that's missing and it should be there.
This is my concern. There's a danger that we're heading down a road that means we need to wrap every single heritage asset in cotton wool and not allow anybody to touch it or walk on it, because all those things cause harm. Hand oil from your hands, scuff of your feet. The longer a heritage asset is up, you know, and that we're going down a very silly cul-de-sac down that way. We need to, how do we preserve a bridge whose fundamental purpose is traffic crossing from one side of the river to the other? I think that's the challenge for the committee. Rich, one more comment.
Sorry, Councillor McCabe, if I can just come back in and clarify. So I've got the list of the points that you'd like clarification on, and we'll get all of that additional information before the next committee. Some of the issues we might be able to discuss at the site visit. I hear what Caroline's saying about logistical difficulties of actually getting to the underside of the bridge. I'll pick that up with Caroline afterwards, because it might be that we can't actually see areas of where these repairs are. But I think that the one thing that we need to, the absolute distinction with this is that an application for listed building consent can only consider the scope of the works that are proposed for the listed the preservation or restoration of the listed building. So I know that the use of the bridge is intangibly linked with traffic management and weight restrictions, but those aren't considerations that can come into play with this. So we will clarify that further in the updated report for the next committee meeting, alongside the additional information that's been requested. But I think that just needs, that's the pinnacle of the consideration for this. Thanks.
Okay, I don't really want to take any more comments. So if you've got more you want for the next meeting, please contact Richard Stott. outside of this. We've got a long way to go still. It's nearly 6:15. Does anyone need another comfort break? Or should we get
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think so, because I think
5
so
minutes.
move as well.
And if we'd have 5 minutes and Richard can get himself sorted out with a bedtime story.
Okay, maybe
I need to switch locations for the children, so I'm going to depart downstairs.
I'll give it 6 minutes then.
Thanks.
So 20 past. Right then, how are we doing? Nearly everybody. I've stocked up on the red grape juice, by the way. This is red grape juice, not wine.
We believe you, Matt.
Huh?
We believe you.
Watered down red grape juice.
It looks like beer actually, with a big. Oh, okay.
Okay. Assuming we're all back. Can't see you, Eleanor. Are you there? Oh. Well, Councillor Jackson, you've said if you're there, you've suggested cake, but you're not. You're not back. You must be eating the cake. Ah, there we are. You're back visually, but I can't hear you. There we go.
Yeah, well, I think you muted me, but anyway, not to worry, I'm here.
Well done. I think we're all back then. So if we can, we'll head on to the next item, which is number 2, Uplands Drive. Can I invite the case officer, Isabel Deone, to present her report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll share my screen. Hopefully. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So this application is for the erection of a garden room / outbuilt building in the rear garden of number 2 Uplands Drive. This slide shows the site location plan and an aerial view. So the property is indicated on the aerial view by a very small black dot that's in the middle. The site is located within the Saltford housing development boundary and is surrounded by other residential sites. It's a relatively large plot which houses quite a large detached dwelling. So here we have the existing and proposed site plan. So as you can see, the proposed garden room will be located close to the rear boundary of the property. There's an existing laurel hedge along this boundary which will be maintained, and additional laurel planting proposed along this boundary. There's also a small tree near the development which will be maintained. So here we have the proposed ground floor plan for the outbuilding. So as you can see, the proposed building will be used ancillary to the main house with space for domestic storage and a home office. It has an L-shaped plan, will feature some decking to the front of the building. Next, we have the proposed elevations, which are labelled. The height of the proposed garden room is approximately 2.6 metres. The garden room will be finished in render and cedar cladding. The existing property features render, so the contemporary use of materials are considered to be appropriate in this location. So finally, we have some site photographs. So this was taken standing at the rear of the house, looking up the garden where the garden room is proposed. The existing shed, which you can see in the back corner, the blue building, will be removed. This photograph again shows the shed that will be removed and a small gap in the laurel planting, which will be infilled. And then this is another view of the rear wall with the laurel planting and the small tree, which is proposed to be retained. And then there's also a view, this is a view of the front of the house, just so you can kind of see the types of materials that the property is constructed with. So the proposal is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the officer report, and I will take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much. We have no public speakers for this one, so we can go straight to questions for the officer. Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot of stuff in the literature on the application about a wildlife corridor. Could you just explain to me where that's meant to be and the significance of it and whether we need to be concerned with it, please?
Yeah, so it relates to the properties at the rear of the garden. So it's 17A to 17D Rodney Road. And in 2009, there was a planning approval for those 4 houses to be built. And part of that approval conditioned a landscape plan for hard and soft landscaping. which was then subsequently discharged, I think in 2011, but that is off the top of my head, which came in with the landscape proposal. It was basically conditioned that any hard landscaping would remain in perpetuity, so the fencing and any trees which were removed after 5 years should be replaced. There's been some dispute between the neighbours as to whether the boarding fence has been moved and is being pushed slightly back so that some of this planting has been removed at the rear. But the evidence, on plan, it appears that it's in the same place, and we've had land registry documents from both parties, which shows that the fencing is where it should be. And as I've said in the officer report, it's more of a civil matter now for them to kind of dispute whether land has changed, etc.
Thank you. Do you know if the laurel hedging is new or has it been there for a while?
I'm actually not sure when it was put in. I think there may neighbours suggest that it's been planted by the current owner, but I'm not 100% sure on when that was put in, I'm afraid.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm fairly certain I know the answer to this, but I have read through quite a few of the comments and objections, and it seems that some of them were focused quite a lot on ownership. Can the officer just confirm that the ownership question isn't really that relevant to us in terms of how we make our decision today?
Yeah, that's right. So I have obtained land registry documents from the applicant as well to just double check that the location plan that we've been given is correct. And as far as I can see, it is. So if there was a dispute about land ownership, that would be a simple matter for them to kind of argue out between themselves.
Okay, Councillor Davies.
Thank you. It's just one question. Am I right in thinking it's not all that much higher than if it was permitted development rights for the actual building?
Yeah, so permitted development rights allow up to 2.5 metres, I think. So this is about 10 centimetres higher than the PD allowance.
It's still in proportion in terms of it's still subservient to the main house, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively large outbuilding, but the main house is a large detached dwelling. So it is felt that it is still subservient, and obviously the height commensurate with the main dwelling.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I was just in terms I do feel sympathetic to the neighbours' concerns about light spill from the Home Office at the end of the garden, as articulated by the Parish Council. And I just wondered if I'm minded to go with the officer's recommendation, whether it's possible to have any sort of condition in terms of managing the light that is generated so it's less of a nuisance to the neighbours. Is that possible?
I could come in on that one.
Sorry, Rich, yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, so the orientation of the outbuilding as shown on plan is such that it's facing the host dwelling, so there wouldn't be any sort of rear light spill or intrusion to the properties to the rear. We couldn't reasonably control lights within the building because that's not within the remit of planning. That would essentially be internal works to an unlisted building, so that falls outside the scope of planning. If you felt it was necessary to control external lighting, we could add that as an additional condition to any approval. But I think that the one thing to bear in mind with this is it comes back to the point that was raised a minute ago, that this is marginally above permitted development. So there is a legitimate fallback that they could erect essentially the same building, albeit 10 centimetres lower, and we wouldn't have these controls over it. So yeah, there's an option to put a condition on there. If that answer clarifies.
That answer clarified?
Yes, it does, yes. So how would we proceed with a condition on external lighting, maybe in the decking or something like that? Was that, I mean, I think they're probably more concerned about the large area of glazing and looking out onto it, but in some way limiting the lighting to the decking might also be beneficial to the neighbours.
Yeah, the usual format of a condition on that would be a negatively worded condition to say something along the lines of no external lighting should be installed without prior written approval of the local planning authority, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Is it possible to put a condition on regarding the remaining vegetation on that green strip to make sure that it's not hacked back or destroyed? Or did you say they're actually planning to, they're suggesting they might plant some more? I mean, if that strip was used as a wildlife corridor, to ensure that that green strip remains would seem quite important.
Yeah, I mean, there's no actual mention of a wildlife corridor in any of the conditions of the 2009 application, and that corridor, if it's in existence, would actually be the side of the properties behind number 2. I mean, the laurel hedging has evidently been planted later on, but it is proposed that it will remain under this proposal and be added to. I mean, I don't know if Rich has anything to say on that, but it could be conditioned that it would remain so.
I think personally I'd be a bit reluctant trying to condition that because it's outside the scope of this application. It's not like conditioning a new landscaping scheme for new planting on the site, retention of existing vegetation that's not otherwise protected. I mean, they're not trees that are protected by TPO or under conservation legislation. There's, I don't think we could interfere with the rights of the homeowner for maintaining that vegetation. I don't know if Simon's got a legal view on that at all, or whether you would agree with that position, but I think it'd be quite hard to condition retention of that laurel hedge.
Thank you, Richard. Chair. What I said, it all hinges on reasonableness, I suppose, and I've got no reason to take a different approach to you, what Rich says.
Okay. Councillor Jackson?
Yes, I mean, a laurel hedge is not frightfully friendly to wildlife. It really isn't. If they were to grub it out and put a hawthorn hedge in, that'd be a much better idea. But I mean, the whole concept of there being a wildlife corridor there suggests to me there is some significant wildlife, and I'm particularly thinking about bats and the effect of the light spill. I'm wondering if it's possible to put I think what these people will probably do if they're going to use it as an office is have valuable things in there they wish to protect, and therefore they'll have a burglar alarm with a great, light coming out every time a cat goes across the roof. So is it possible to condition that there shouldn't be a glaring light alert burglar alarm? And I must say, I'm amazed how big it is. It's the size of my living room, but there you are.
How, Councillor McPhee?
Right. Well, I mean, my view is if we're only 10 centimetres over, really, I feel as though we should just move to accept it's what it is. It's well within, or very, very close to not requiring any permission at all.
Would you be interested in putting a condition on around external lighting?
If you can find one that's okay for bats.
Can I suggest your motion should be to delegate to permit and leave officers to work out some wording about lighting?
I'd be happy with that.
Okay, Councillor Rigby has said she's happy to second that. So the motion is to delegate to permit. Officers will work out something around exterior lighting. Any further comments? So if we can move to the vote on that, go alphabetical. Councillor Clark. Oh no, Councillor Clark, I'm sorry, you missed part of the...
I can't vote.
You can't vote, so sorry you missed you. Glad you're back.
Yeah.
So start then on the voting with Councillor Craig.
Or
Councillor Davis. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Hounsell. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Jackson. Councillor McPhee. Councillor McCabe. And Councillor Rigby.
4.
Jolly good. So is that 9 with 1 excused?
That's right, that's 9 in favour, so that's
okay. Let's delegate to permit with some wording around lighting. We're now moving on to items 7 and 8, the Liberal Democrats HQ at 31 James Street West. I'm going to be handing over the chair to Councillor Davis, myself, Councillor Rigby and Councillor McPhee. We will excuse ourselves.
Thank you. Wait a moment for them to excuse themselves. Just got Councillor McPhee.
Should I be doing something, or will I be excused?
I think if you mute yourself and take your video off, that will go on now.
It's just been moved to the waiting room, so.
Yeah, I think we're all right. So thank you, Helen, for waiting. And it's over you to start us off, please.
Councillor Davis, can I just
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm joining the meeting via telephone, and Rich is going to do the PowerPoint presentation, put the slides up. There is a bit of delay, so you'll have to apologise if it's not quite syncing. So I'm reporting these two items together. The reports are separate in your agenda, and it's for remodelling the front garden to include the installation of a new lift platform at the Liberal Democrats headquarters on James Street West.
Sorry, Helen, can I just, I'm struggling to find, because I'm doing this via my iPad, I'm just struggling to get onto the actual presentation. So
Okay.
Sorry about this, we've had another glitch
Okay,
today.
that's right.
Plagued by IT at today's committee. And now my iPad is completely frozen. Right.
Not has Hayden got access to it, Richard, or not?
I'm not sure. Hayden, are you there at the moment? Are you on?
Yes, I can access it if
Can you?
yeah, I can access it now.
Sorry, I'm trying to do this through my iPad and it is just not letting me onto the bit that I need to be in.
Sorry, bear with me a second.
Thanks, Hayden.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think we can all see it.
Okay.
So if you're Hayden, if you're okay to sort of push the buttons and move through the slides, Helen can read to them. So, thank you.
Okay.
So Helen,
Hayden, probably if you go onto the existing elevations and plans, I think that's the third slide along. I think we've established the address and the site location.
Is that the one now?
Next one. So I keep. So there's a bit of a delay. It's the third slide along is the existing setup. Okay.
Yeah, we've got plan elevation sections as existing on the screen now, Helen.
Yeah, that's okay. That's perfect. Right. So the that gives you an idea of how it is at the moment. The principle of an external lift was established following consent of recent applications earlier in the year for various works, which included lift and extension to the rear of the property. An amendment is now sought in respect of the external lift to the front, and that is the only change. So Hayden, I don't know if you want to go on to the proposed slide, which is should be next one along.
That one's up now.
Okay, so the proposal under consideration is for a smaller through lift design. So instead of it being in parallel and adjacent to the existing front steps as previously approved, it would now be accessed at a point central to the existing front planter. So this would, in effect, split the front planter in two. There would be gates across the middle to match the railings, and that would provide some sort of visual continuity. The change in lift design would mean that users no longer have to turn on the lift platform, so that makes it more practical and obviously usable. Subject to planting becoming established, the lift mechanism would largely be screened behind the planters, and make it less visible, whereas before is much more sort of obvious being adjacent to the steps. A planting scheme has been put forward and its implementation would be subject to condition. The railings, now they're going to be reused from the rear of the premises, and any shortfall would be made to match. Following amendment, the spikes of the railings will now be left as they are and not shortened or flattened. So we've had revised drawings to confirm that, and a condition to secure is also recommended. External materials connected with the remodelling of the planters in the front area will also be secured by condition. And the applications on this basis are recommended for approval. Any questions? I think there are a few photos as well. Hayden, if you go on to the next slide, just to give you an idea of how it is at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Hayden. Richard
Yeah.
and Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Hayden, for presenting or moving through the slides there.
Oh, that's fine.
Right, there are no speakers, so are there any questions, first of all, for the officer? No, it's open for debate then. Sue, do you want to start off the debate as it's in your ward?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm would like to propose that we vote to go with the officer here. I mean, the reason this has come before committee is because of what it is and where it is. I don't feel there's anything controversial in the plan, so I'd like to propose that we agree with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Jackson.
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. I've got a proposal and which has been seconded to accept the officer's recommendation as printed. Is there no one else looks like they wish to speak? So if I just go through in alphabetical order, need to do it in 2 goes. So first of all, first it will be for the listed building, and then well, the 2 orders are in there. So first of all, and that's for both Councillor Craig and Councillor Jackson, yes?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Number 7 and number 8 on our agenda. So Councillor Clark. 4. Councillor Craig.
4.
Myself 4. Councillor Hodge.
4.
Councillor Hounsell.
4.
Councillor Hughes.
4.
And Councillor Jackson.
4.
And then the same again for what's number 8 on our agenda. Same proposers and seconders. So Councillor Clark again.
4.
Councillor Craig.
4.
Myself 4. Councillor Hodge.
4.
Councillor Hounsell.
4.
Councillor Hughes.
4.
And Councillor Jackson.
4.
And Marie, would you just like to confirm the outcome of that, please?
Yeah, that's 7 in favour, so that's carried, Chair, both applications.
Thank you. We just need to let the others back in and then they'll be with us. Okay, we're ready when you're all back in.
Thank you, Sally. Just wait for councillors Rigby and Eleanor, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, great stuff.
I've never been away.
Sorry, Councillor Murphy and Councillor Rigby are also back. So we can move on to the next item, item 920 Wells Way. Can I invite the case officer Hayden Foster to give his presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just share my screen. So can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. Just an update on the chair report or the committee report. The recommendation should read as consent given as for advertisement application. So the application relates to a ground floor retail unit situated off Wells Way. The site is set within the residential area of Wickham and Lincoln. The Bath Conservation Area and the World Heritage Site are also designations See, the application seeks consent for the display of one non-illuminated company logo on a retractable canopy above a private forecourt. And the application has been referred to committee as the applicant has direct links with an employee within the planning service. So here's just a few, it's an area on the site location plan of the site indicated by red, and the site there on the Wellsway. And here's a few images drawn for the existing and proposed elevation. The existing there to the left showing the shop front, and the proposed right with the canopy drawn out. And here's the proposed logo design. And some site photographs of the front of the shop. And a few views there from the side of the shop showing the private forecourt in front of the shop. So as noted, it is recommended that consent be granted. The application is considered to present an appropriate design, and the sitting of the logo is also not considered to result in negative amenity or highway safety concerns.
Thank you very much. Where's my chat gone? Do we have any questions for the officer, Councillor Jackson? Councillor Jackson, I have you in the chat box as MIS? But
I'm so sorry, I didn't realise I was muted.
Oh, there we go.
What I was going to say is this is a proposal, not a question, except in one small regard. I went to have a look at the site yesterday. I think that what is proposed is a very considerable improvement. We're in a conservation area, aren't we? So I think this should go not as a negative that it will do no harm, but that it will improve and conserve and enhance the actual shop. And I propose we go with the officer's recommendation to consent.
Anybody would like to second that?
Happy to second.
Oh, Councillor Hounsell, thank you. Any further comments or questions? No, in which case I think we'll move straight to the vote to consent, accept the officer's recommendation to consent. So Councillor Rigby?
For.
Councillor McCabe for, Councillor McPhee? Is he? Oh, there we go. Councillor Jackson?
For.
Councillor Hughes?
For.
Councillor Hounsell?
For.
Councillor Hodge?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Craig?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
That's unanimous, I think, Marie. So is that 10, is it?
Yeah, that's unanimous. Okay, that's 10.
Lovely. So that's consent. Thank you very much, Hayden, for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you to any other members of the public who are still viewing on YouTube. We move on to number 7, then Enforcement Action Update Report. The committee's asked to note the update report, but as I mentioned, Rich, I hadn't clocked that I'd seen it.
Okay.
Can you just give a quick verbal?
Yeah, on the let me just get the report up. So it was just a position as to where we're at with. So members will recall that you agreed to commence injunctive proceedings against the owner of, or the operator and owner of Roberts Yard at Marsh Lane, Clutton. It's an long-going enforcement issue. Positive resolution from members to commence injunction action. And at the moment, we are going through the processes, preparing the statements for court. They're currently with our barrister at the moment, who has considered and given some feedback on it. So we're sort of at the we're following court procedure now as to what we're required to do to get the case to court. So there's not really a great deal that we can update on this. Unfortunately, with these matters, when they start moving into the sort of court sphere, we are a little bit at the beck and call of the court timetables and the court procedures that we have to follow. So Simon, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to clarify on where we're at on with the court, apart from the fact that the statements have been prepared and they're currently with our barrister.
No, thank you, Rich. There's nothing more to add, really. It's that I think it's probably the process has taken longer due to the situation we have been in for all working remotely. The owner's been written to under the pre-action protocol to advise them to comply again, otherwise proceedings will be issued, which is what the process says should happen. So the next step will be, if the enforcement notice is still not being complied with, to issue the proceedings. But obviously everyone working remotely, there are logistical problems to get overcome sometimes without issuing papers and get them served. So, but yeah, nothing to add.
Very good. Was that the Clutton one or the Walcott one?
That's the Clutton.
The Clutton one.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, I can give you an update on the Queenswood Avenue one as well, because I think quite a few councillors have been copied on emails back and forth on this. I'm not sure if all committee members have. I think there's possibly a little bit of confusion, which going forward we will make it clear with any recommendations that come. Once we have to come to committee to get the resolution to take direct action. It's not a delegated function to officers, so we need that committee nod to be able to do it. Once we've got a direct action resolution, we're then required to go back to the landowner to say to them, we've now got this resolution in place because you failed to comply with an enforcement notice or a section 215 notice, and this is really the last opportunity to actually voluntarily comply with something. If at that stage they don't comply, we've then got our contractors lined up who will go in and start either demolishing or clearing or removing whatever the terms of that notice were. So back in January this year, when it came to committee with a request for direct action on a site at Leighton Road in Weston, we went to the landowner after the committee gave its resolution, advised him that we now had the resolution in the bag and we could send our contractors in, and he just still refused to comply with the notice. So we had diggers on site within the week on that one. Queenswood Avenue, similar request came to committee a couple of months ago. Resolution was granted to commence direct action, and following the its MHCLG guidance and best practice set out in the NPPG, National Planning Practice Guidance, we contacted the landowner, advised him that he's still failing to comply with his enforcement notice, and we've now had a unanimous resolution on the taking direct action. And his response was, I don't want to incur the council's costs on this, so I'm going to do it myself. At which point we're then obliged to set a realistic or reasonable timescale for him to undertake that work. He's been given until the 30th of September. In part, that date was given because of the amount of work and required to clear the land and the amount of material on that land. And he's currently, albeit very slowly, moving stuff from that site. Now we've got officers going up there, was fortnightly, at the moment it's weekly, to keep an eye on what's going on. We're documenting the progress, and there is progress being made with this site. Something that members should probably be aware of, the landowner he owns an adjoining piece of land that wasn't subject to the enforcement notice and is not subject to the direct action request. And until recently, that land has been maintained relatively clear. It was never a cause for concern. It wasn't subject to enforcement notice. We've become aware from local ward members and local residents that he's actually moving some material onto that piece of land now. So if the 30th of September comes and the piece of land in question that we've got the notice on isn't clear, we will send in our contractors to clear that land. Visually, there's very little separation between that and the adjoining piece of land, which is not covered by the notice. And it's now getting to a point where we're going to have to serve a new enforcement notice on this adjoining piece of land because it's now becoming a breach of planning, and effectively back to square one with that. So in terms of us managing local ward member expectation and local residents' expectations, I'm going to be contacting everyone to advise them that that's the situation. We have advised the landowner that if this is the tact he's going down, he's going to end up back in the same situation he is with this current piece of land. But we have got this commitment we've got the resolution from committee in the bag to clear the piece of land subject to the current enforcement notice. And if that's not done by the 30th of September, we'll revisit on the 1st of October once the deadline's passed, and we've got a contractor lined up to go in and do that. So I can keep members updated as progress with that. It might be that he clears the land entirely, in which case we don't need to take direct action, which would be a positive outcome. But I'll keep members updated as we go on with that. And in terms of, there has been a question as to future requests for direct action when we put them to committee, if we could set timescales so members are aware of the timescales and the process involved. I think one of the difficulties with setting a firm timescale within the committee request is we don't know what the actions or response will be of the landowner once we've had the resolution from committee. We'll always give between 7 and 14 days for them to respond once we've had the committee resolution. But their actions thereafter will determine whether we go straight into the site or whether we have to give them a reasonable period to comply. So I think it's going to be quite difficult to put that in as an actual piece within the committee reports, but we can set out the process that we'll follow and give commitment to give regular feedbacks to committee once resolutions have been granted. So I don't know, Councillor McCabe, if that is sufficient update for now.
That's good, and I can ask members if they have any questions, and Councillor Rigby is first.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, Rich. That was really, really helpful to get that, because I have to say it might have been my ignorance, but I certainly think it applies to the residents. My assumption was when you came to committee and kind of said, we've run out of other options. The reason we're coming to committee and we need this enforcement notice is because nothing else has worked. My expectation was probably wrongly set, now benefit of hindsight, that something would almost be done immediately. So I think it's key, and you highlighted it yourself, it's key that you just keep communicating with us so that we know at what stage things are, because we all want, you know, I'm trying to look at it from a resident's point of view. It must be totally frustrating. They've had this for 2 years. They believe that the planning committee says, right, that's it, send someone in and clear it, and that's not happened from their perspective. So I think what you're proposing going forward makes a lot of sense going forward, and I'm really pleased that you're looking at this on a weekly basis, because I happen to have walked past it not that long ago. I can see there's minimal progress.
Yeah.
Okay, can I take Councillor Jackson's question as well?
Well, I've got two questions, just to be greedy. I'm wondering what applies of the various orders historically and refused planning accesses to the situation which it is alleged is developing, but I haven't got it checked out, that the Clutton supplies are being moved to Clandown to the old chapel site, which has only got permission for staff car parking, not for storage containers or anything else. And Mr. Bidwell had to remove such items from the site. So if anything reappears there, can one automatically activate old orders, or does one have to get a fresh one? And the second question is, next meeting, would it be possible to have an update on 8 Wells Square, Westfield?
Yeah. So yeah, I can do the easy question first. Yes, we can get you an update on 8 Wells Square for the next committee. The Bidwell site, if it's got a pre-existing enforcement notice on it, as long as the council hasn't withdrawn the enforcement notice, it would still bind to the land. So if someone has come onto the land knowing there's a pre-existing, or it's a land charge, they're still bound by the terms of that notice. So if what they're doing, the activity that they're doing, is still in contravention of that old enforcement notice, they're still in breach of that notice. It's an automatic breach of the notice. I don't think there's a necessity to automatically serve a new enforcement notice. We've got the powers that come with that notice already in place. We'd have to have a look at the specific circumstances of the case, ensure that the boundaries on the original notice still apply to the relevant area, and just make sure that it does apply. But the planning considerations, assuming it's a like-for-like breach of planning control that's occurring, and there's no material change in the planning position, when considering the expediency of enforcement action, if it's already been tested once at appeal and the planning position hasn't shifted, it would in all likelihood be expedient to serve a new notice if the pre-existing notice didn't still bite, if that makes sense. So yeah, we'll have a look at this. We have got an open case on that one. I think one of the residents has contacted us about that site. It is unfortunate that sometimes in clearing one site, the owner or perpetrator will just shift the problem to somewhere else, and then we have to start the clock again. Moving to the Bidwell site's a little bit further than what Mr. Gapper's doing at Queenswood, where he's literally moving one side of the fence to another. So yeah, I can come back to you individually on that one, Councillor Jackson.
Very good.
Thanks
Anything
very
else,
much.
Eleanor?
No, that's excellent. That's what I needed to know, is because I've got Clandown residents on email asking me what's going on, what can they do, do we have to put up with another Bidwell, and so on. Of course, it is slightly complicated in that there was a planning consent for 29 houses on this site, but as the company did not fulfill the conditions, it came to committee, I think in 2015. Oh no, that can't be right. Yeah, I think it did. It came back to committee, who then decided to annul it, because the conditions were not fulfilled and the ecological reports had not been submitted. But that wouldn't have any bearing on this, would it? It would.
No.
It just doesn't
We
exist.
just look at the straight planning breach. I think if you could just direct residents to send the information into my team at planning _enforcement at Bath Ness, we can pick that up and register them as complainants on the file, and then keep them updated as well.
Great stuff. Okay, Councillor Clark. You're up, Vic.
Just obviously these matters take a lot of time and resource of Baines, not just the incremental cost relating to legal people if we go that far, to contractors. Do we actually record the time of Richard and our legal people and all the people that are visiting that? Because this is an enormous resource that we're being used. And I think the people who are not taking notice of these orders should be charged. Do we record the time and do we charge them?
Yeah, so it depends on the circuit. If you go down the prosecution or the injunction route, we'd record the time that's attributed to working on those cases. If costs are awarded in the council's favour, we would wrap up those costs into that order. Direct action is a little bit more tricky because a lot of the work is essentially day-to-day functions of the planning enforcement team. So it's sort of it's fees that are already accounted. Yeah.
But Richard, could we charge them? Is it a matter of policy that we don't? Because as far as I'm concerned, you say that's part of your role or the enforcement role, but I think we should be recovering their costs.
Yeah, I can double. I don't know the answer, to be honest, off the top of my head right now, but I can find out what elements of cost recovery can. Certainly, any expenditure that we have in taking direct action. So if we have to pay for contractors to go in, that then forms part of the charge on the land, and it's recoverable, and we do push to recover those. So I can clarify and find out whether we can cover officer hours. You're right, it does. It is resource intensive.
Well, we can.
Are these orders on an individual, or if they operate through a limited company, would it be on their company?
It's on the land, so it's a land charge. So the note, if we serve an enforcement notice, we serve it on all interested parties, but the notice itself is tied to the land rather than the individual. And that's why, like in the case that Councillor Jackson was mentioning, although the individual who owned that previous piece of land has since moved on, the notice is still binding to that land, which is why we can effectively reactivate the terms of that enforcement notice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions there, so we'll move on. Policy development. There's no items for consideration at this meeting, and the member call-in report deferred. The last meeting will be considered. Hopefully, it'll be ready in time for September. The appeals report. You're asked to note that report, but does anybody have any comments or questions on the appeals report? In that case, folks, the date of the next meeting will be Wednesday, the 23rd of September 2020. The site visits will take place on Monday, the 14th of September. Thank you all for all your hard work to get to today, as well as getting through today. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Thank you to the
Chair, we have a may I speak on chat.
Oh, oi, Councillor Rigby.
I started with may I speak and just moved on to oi.
Oi.
The appeals report. I was particularly interested in the old police station in Keynsham. And I just wondered if it would be possible on something that my recollection is that we turned that down relatively, not quite unanimously, but relatively firmly. I think it might help, certainly my learning and maybe some of the other members' learning, if we can get a report that just doesn't say, yes, it was overturned on appeal, but what it was specifically that was said that made it be overturned, so that we're aware of that when we make our next decisions, because I thought that was quite defendable, and obviously we didn't defend it. So I would like slightly more information if I could.
Yeah, we can. We could do or is the request a report to come to the next committee, summarising that one, or would you like that done outside? Because we could give a briefing outside of the scope of the committee meeting to all members with a summary. So what would be the preference?
I mean, from my perspective, and I certainly wouldn't want it for absolutely every single appeal, but for for some of the ones that we had long debates on and that we came to a decision that there was then appeal outside of the committee, I would quite like to know the reasons why, because that might also feed into our separate discussions on policy, because if we keep getting overturned on one set of stuff, then it tells me that we need to change our policies in the processes that we're now doing. So that's what I'm hopeful of.
Chair, can we just be sent a copy of the inspector's report?
Yeah.
Would that be the best way to deal with this?
Yeah, if the inspector's report is probably the good starting point, because that will set out the inspector's thought process and reasoning and rationale for allowing that appeal. Maybe if we circulate the inspector's report first, and then if there's any specific queries that come out of that, they can feed back through me or through the relevant case officer, and we can pick those up as a group.
I think there was a proposal, wasn't there, that we should have some training on this from Ms. Friedland. An email came round and we were asked if we thought it was a good idea. And I think in the light of what Councillor Rigby said, it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think we are looking at one thing on the, actually I should have mentioned it, it would probably tie under the enforcement side of things. We're probably going to facilitate some update training on enforcement. All members will have had the sort of initial training at the start. And as things have gone on and sort of understanding of cases has come forward, we're going to take that to the next level, and we'll do some more process and procedure training for that. So I can speak to Paul Freeland as well about the conservation area and heritage training and do some update training with members. So I'll feed that back to the management.
The training is on the 22nd of September, I think that Ellen is referring to.
Yes, that's right.
It's to do with enforcement. It wasn't particularly conservation.
No, I thought it was to do with, I was sure it was something to do with costs at appeals as well, she put in there.
I've been booted out of my system, which is not helpful. I can pick that up. But yeah,
decision making.
Sorry?
And decision making, I think, was part of it.
Yes, yeah, that's what she called it, yes.
Yeah, so there will be some additional training facilitated. I'm not sure at the moment whether that will be in person or virtually. I think, we get Simon, am I right in saying?
On our invite, Richard, it says Zoom on our invitations.
Okay, it's a Zoom meeting. And Simon, am I right in saying that we're getting external legal advisor to come and deliver the training?
That's right, on the 22nd. I'm not sure what time is fixed yet, because that hasn't been finalised, but there would be a QC giving the training virtually. So it's worth listening to.
Yeah.
1:30 is on the invitation.
I don't think I've had that invitation, so I'm sorry, I'm completely naive to, this is obviously something that's been set up, and I don't think I've had that invitation, so apologies, I hadn't realised that was already in training.
Never mind. Okay, anything else before we go home? Well, we are home, but anything else? Okay, so yeah, so next meeting Wednesday the 23rd, site visits Monday the 14th. Thank you all for watching and attending, and I formally close the meeting at 7:10.
Thank you.
See you all soon.